Chapter 182. It was impossible to tell the age of the palace lord. It was rumored that he was the successor of Fairy Qingmei, but no one knew if the rumors were true or false. After Fairy Qingmei lived in seclusion, she established the Celestial Lake Palace and accepted female disciples, passing down her legacy generation after generation. However, it was extremely rare for outsiders to catch a glimpse of her. The palace lord of the Celestial Lake Palace smiled at the crowd and nodded her head. If you want to enter the Celestial Lake, you should all understand the dangers involved. I wonder which powers are the elites from. Everyone understood that this wasn't a question for everyone. He just wanted to see which overlord-level experts had come. Junior is Ouyang Quangxing from the Ouyang clan of the Azure Continent. The clan lord wishes for me to send his regards to Fairy Qingmei. Ouyang Quangxing took a step forward, and the beautiful maiden beside him also spoke. Jiang Ting from the Jiang clan of the Wind Continent pays her respects to the palace lord. Ouyang Quangxing was forthright, but the maiden had a hint of arrogance in her. That was her natural demeanor. It wasn't because she wanted to disrespect the palace lord. Descendants of the Ouyang aristocrat clan and Jiang clan, please take a seat. The palace lord smiled as he nodded. Ouyang Quangxing and Jiang Ting didn't stand on ceremony. Behind them, there were a few others from their respective clans. Ouyang Quangxing is actually together with Jiang Ting. The eyes of many flickered with astonishment. The Ouyang aristocrat clan and Jiang clan were both transcendent powers in the 9 continents. Beast King Hall Shiki. Shiki indifferently stated as he took a step forward. The hearts of the spectators all understood that these transcendent powers were indeed a tier higher than others. Please take a seat. The palace lord smiled. Wang Xiao from the Wang clan of the War Continent. Another white-robed young man stepped forward, causing the crowd to be startled. Even the Wang clan had come. It seemed like the younger generations of the transcendent powers treated the Celestial Lake Palace as a training ground for them. If they were to release their cultivation bases, they would definitely discover that their cultivation bases were all at the peak of arterial circulation. As for the others beside them, they could be at the peak of arterial circulation or yuanfu. After all, the statuses of each transcendent power were different. Mu Baifei from the Swallow Continent. This person wore a long white robe, and he seemed especially clean and delicate. However, there was a hint of sharpness between his brows. A swordsman from the Yen province. He must be a swordsman from the Yen province. Sky Demon Sect Yaosheng. Green Cloud Pavilion Qianmingyu. Several people stepped forward, and the palace lord allowed them to be seated. The crowd scrutinized those who were seated, and couldn't help but to silently memorize their faces. Especially those who were seated, there was a high possibility that they would become the most dazzling characters of the 9 continents in the future. Ouyang Quangxing was one of them. Qin Wentian, come here too. After Qianmingyu sat down, she called out to Qin Wentian, as the members of the Green Cloud Pavilion stood behind her. Qin Wentian froze for a moment, before lightly nodding his head as he walked to the back of Qianmingyu. Since Qianmingyu had spoken, it wouldn't be good for him to reject her request. Are these two from the Azure Continent as well? The palace lord smiled as he looked at Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng, as though he was extremely polite to everyone. They are my friends from a place called the Chu country, Qin Wentian said. Qianmingyu replied with a smile, causing a bright light to flash in the eyes of the palace lord, as she cast a deep glance at Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng. However, very quickly, the palace lord shifted her gaze away, as she smiled at the crowd. Only 7 people can bathe within the Celestial Lake. I'm sure all of you are clear of the dangers within, so I won't say anything more. I only hope that all of you will show mercy when you fight. You only have a month's time. The crowd nodded their heads. They naturally understood the rules. Let's go in, we won't waste your time. Don't bring demonic beasts in. The palace lord laughed, causing the hearts of the crowd to be filled with excitement as they walked towards the entrance of the Celestial Lake. Let's go. Qianmingyu stood up and walked down the stairs leading to the Celestial Lake. Qin Wentian discovered that the water wasn't actually lake water, as it wouldn't wet his robes at all. What a mystical place. Qin Wentian had an expression of amazement on his face, as he and Mo Qingqing stepped in together. Instantly, Qin Wentian felt a mysterious force acting on his body. My Yuanfu. The expression in Mo Qingqing's eyes changed. As she stepped into the celestial lake, she discovered that the connection between her Yuanfu and her meridians had been severed. At this moment, they had already stepped into the celestial lake. Qin Wentian and the rest discovered that the stairs were still there, but they were now in a different space, filled with mystical starlight. In front of them, there was only one ancient pathway. Qianmingyu glanced at Mo Qingqing in bewilderment as she asked, "You guys don't know about the refinement grounds of the celestial lake?" "Not really." Qin Wentian shook his head. "Don't be ridiculous." Qianmingyu couldn't help but berate. "If you don't know, why did you guys come all the way here? The refinement grounds of the celestial lake and the spirit beast's refinement grounds are both part of the 18 training grounds of the Grand Xia Empire. Here, there's a mysterious force that seals one's Yuanfu. Those at the Yuanfu realm would be the same as those at the peak of the arterial circulation realm. If not, wouldn't those at the arterial circulation realm be courting death? Of course, even if their Yuanfu is sealed, those at the Yuanfu realm who have cultivated powerful innate techniques would still have an advantage. However, the innate techniques they cultivate would also have a high consumption rate of yuan energy. And in this place, if you deplete the yuan energy in your body without any way to replenish it, wouldn't you be courting death? Qin Wentian's gaze froze. If one's Yuanfu was sealed, and their connection with their body was severed, they wouldn't even be able to fly freely. In the refinement grounds of the celestial lake, the advantage of a Yuanfu realm cultivator would be reduced to the minimum. It's said that the refinement grounds of the celestial lake are naturally formed. And in addition to the interference of the celestial lake palace, there's an additional layer of danger. It won't be so easy to fight for the celestial lake. You are really too ridiculous. Qianmingyu coldly spoke. Although her tone wasn't very good, it had something to do with her identity and she was truly doing this for his own good. Qin Wentian naturally wouldn't mind it too much. He casually smiled and replied, "We will just follow you. Where is the celestial pond?" At the end of the refinement grounds of the celestial lake is the location of the celestial lake. Qianmingyu gazed at the ancient pathway. Qin Wentian discovered that the others had already started on their way, rushing ahead. Evidently, they were in a rush. "Mingyu, why are you talking so much to him? Let's hurry." A beautiful lady beside her frowned as she stared at Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing. She was somewhat unhappy, not knowing what Qianmingyu was thinking. "Let's go," Qianmingyu coldly spoke. After which, the group of them sprinted ahead at an extremely fast speed. Qin Wentian turned his gaze ahead. He discovered that the people on the ancient pathway had all distanced themselves from each other, and were extremely cautious. This was especially so for those from the other transcendent powers. In fact, there were even some who had formed alliances. This subtle situation caused Qin Wentian's heart to be as clear as snow. There were only 7 slots for the celestial lake, and it seemed that the most dangerous aspect of the refinement grounds was the human heart. But even so, there were still so many people who came here to temper themselves. Most probably, these people all had a certain level of confidence in their own strength. Forest of Illusions, be careful. This place will trap us for a period of time. Qianmingyu stared at the forest in front of them, only to see the crowd of cultivators rushing into it, disappearing in an instant. Follow closely. Qianmingyu's countenance turned heavy. They also stepped into the Forest of Illusions, and as they did so, many ancient trees appeared, resembling a maze. Qianmingyu waved her hands, and the group of them began to slow down their pace, shuttling through the Forest of Illusions. However, they soon discovered that they couldn't get out, and they couldn't even find the others. Indeed, it's the same as the rumors. Qianmingyu continued. In the refinement grounds of the celestial lake, it's the survival of the fittest. There's no such thing as luck. What should we do now? Someone asked Qianmingyu. Let's rest here, Qianmingyu replied. She actually stopped and sat down on the grass. The quiet psychedelic forest was filled with a suffocating oppressive energy, giving people a gloomy feeling. Rustling sounds rang out, and Qianmingyu's body stiffened as she surveyed her surroundings with vigilance. Very swiftly, A group of silhouettes gradually appeared in her line of sight. These were the people from the Beast King Hall, with Shiki in the lead. Shiki had once dashed alone in the Demon Mountain City, but evidently, he wasn't alone. These transcendent powers weren't so stupid as to enter the refinement grounds of the Celestial Lake alone. Shiki's steps were extremely slow, and the eyes that stared at Qianmingyu flickered with greed, the greed of a beast. Qianmingyu furrowed her brows as she coldly stated, "Shiki, does the Beast King Hall really want to clash with the Green Cloud Pavilion? This isn't a good idea." "Is that so?" A sinister smile appeared on Shiki's face, after which, Qianmingyu abruptly shifted her gaze, only to see another group of silhouettes appearing. Yao Sheng from the Celestial Palace. Qianmingyu froze as her countenance turned incredibly unsightly. The Beast King Hall and the Celestial Palace were both transcendent powers in the Demon Continent, yet they had actually joined forces. "You can only blame your Green Cloud Pavilion for being unlucky," Yao Sheng sinisterly stated, as he swept a glance at Qin Wentian. He naturally still remembered Qin Wentian, who had once entered the refinement grounds of the spirit beasts. "Run." Qianmingyu spoke in a low voice, causing the hearts of the crowd to tremble. Qianmingyu was extremely decisive. She knew that she was unlucky, and didn't want to clash head-on. "You guys capture her alive." Shiki pointed to Mo Qingqing, who was standing beside Qin Wentian, as he greedily advanced towards Qianmingyu. "Flee!" Qianmingyu shouted, and instantly, the members of the Green Cloud Pavilion fled in different directions. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing also sprinted towards a certain direction. "Ah!" Shiki abruptly stomped on the ground as he soared up into the air. With a howl of rage, a terrifying soundwave blasted outwards as the shadow of a berserk lion appeared in the air. When Shiki's body landed on the ground, he instantly blasted out a punch containing a terrifying amount of energy. That person was stunned by the soundwave, and by the time he regained his senses, the fist had already smashed into his head, causing it to explode. The members of the Beast King Hall and Sky Demon sect moved at the same time, cleansing the members of the Green Cloud Pavilion. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing sprinted towards a certain direction, only to see the members of the Beast King Hall chasing after them at an incredible speed. An ancient halberd appeared in Qin Wentian's hands, as a terrifying cold light flickered in his eyes. "Wentian, try not to exhaust as much energy as possible. The refinement grounds of the Celestial Lake is still very long," Mo Qingqing advised, causing Qin Wentian's heart to tremble as he nodded his head. Right now, it was true that he couldn't overexert himself. The path ahead was still very long, and this was only the beginning. Chapter 183. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing's speed was exceedingly fast. There were a total of 5 people chasing after them, and very soon, they were far away from the place where Qin Wentian was resting. Not only that, Qin Wentian's footsteps didn't stop as he continued sprinting forward. This caused the gazes of the pursuers to turn exceptionally cold. The speed of the two in front of them wasn't inferior to theirs, and if they were to get too far away from the group, they might encounter experts from other transcendent powers. People from the Beast King Hall? At this moment, a silhouette appeared in front of them. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing halted their steps. It was none other than Ouyang Guangxing. "Ouyang Guangxing, this matter has nothing to do with you." The 5 experts from the Beast King Hall surrounded Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing. Only after scanning the surroundings and confirming that there was no one else from the Ouyang aristocrat clan, did they feel relieved. However, this Ouyang Guangxing was truly arrogant enough. He actually left the group alone. "Emichim." Ouyang Guangxing laughed, crossing his arms in front of his chest as though he was waiting to watch a good show. The eyes of the leader of the Beast King Hall gleamed with a demonic coldness. He glanced at Ouyang Guangxing before speaking to the other 4. "Kill the males." "Right." The robes of the 4 fluttered in the wind as demonic qi gushed forth from their bodies. 2 of them walked towards Qin Wentian, while the other 2 walked towards Mo Qingqing. Qin Wentian raised his ancient halberd horizontally, as a demonic light flashed in his eyes, so cold that it could pierce into the bones. The youth from earlier instantly turned devilishly handsome, as his robes fluttered in the wind, exuding an intense killing intent. The two walking towards Qin Wentian simultaneously acted. One of them had a palm as sharp as an eagle's claw, smashing out towards Qin Wentian. The shadow of the eagle's claw appeared in the air as a terrifying demonic wind gushed forth, wanting to tear Qin Wentian into pieces. The other one blasted out a tyrannical gigantic palm, akin to the palm of a gigantic beast. In their eyes, Qin Wentian was already a dead man. Buzz! A raging wind swept out. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd exploded forth, directly pouncing towards the incoming eagle claw. His speed was as fast as lightning, and the terrifying strength caused the raging wind to howl, as well as a terrifyingly sharp sword chi. A piercing sound rang out. The ancient halberd directly broke apart the sharp claws of the falling mountain palms, penetrating through the hands of his opponent and piercing into his brain. At the same time, Qin Wentian lifted his left hand as he executed the falling mountain palms. With a thunderous boom, the gigantic palms of his opponent collided with the falling mountain palms, causing a raging wind to billow out. However, when Qin Wentian saw the coldness in Qin Wentian's eyes, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. Qin Wentian retreated slightly as his ancient halberd swept out horizontally, resembling the feathers of a vermilion bird. That person could feel the terrifying sharpness of the halberd as he roared in rage. Both his palms simultaneously blasted out. Yet Qin Wentian opened his mouth and spat out a beam of sword light. The sharpness of the sword slashed through the head of that person, killing him instantly. In terms of combat, there were very few cultivators at the 9th level of the arterial circulation realm who could contend against Qin Wentian. After killing the two of them, Qin Wentian glanced at the silhouette in front of him. Abruptly he turned around, but he didn't lunge towards his opponent. Instead, he dashed towards Mo Qingcheng. An indomitable force gushed forth as demonic qi ravaged the area. Very quickly, the ancient halberd was embedded into the head of that person. Abruptly, a terrifying surge of demonic qi erupted forth. That person, who had been motionless all this while, released 3 beast-type astral souls. Resplendent astral light flashed as he advanced towards Qin Wentian, his demonic qi towering to the heavens. Roar! A demonic roar rang out, causing Qin Wentian's eardrums to tremble. After which, it was as though he could see a myriad of beasts rushing towards him, wanting to devour him whole. A Yuanfu cultivator. Qin Wentian's heart trembled. Not only that, this person was an extremely powerful Yuanfu cultivator, wanting to kill him in a single strike. His opponent also knew that his Yuanfu was sealed, and using such a powerful innate technique would consume a great deal of energy. Hence, he decided to kill Qin Wentian in a single strike, saving him from further exhaustion. He also noticed that Mo Qingcheng was also a Yuanfu cultivator. Qin Wentian felt his eardrums about to explode. The myriad of beasts rushing towards him caused him to feel a terrifying pressure. A raging wind swept through the air, and Qin Wentian's blood seemed to be on fire. The demonic qi emanating from him grew stronger and stronger. After which, he lightly took a step forward, and this step caused his entire person to transform into a blur. Executing the meteor stance, a terrifying beam of light pierced through everything, rushing towards that terrifying attack. Boom boom boom. The powerful force was akin to a hurricane, lacerating Qin Wentian's body. However, his physique was that of a demonic beast. His afterimage continued advancing forward, and the ancient halberd wouldn't retreat. Rumble! The terrifying force caused Qin Wentian's body to be flung through the air, smashing through 2 large trees. He groaned in agony as he coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. The demonic qi in front of him continued to wreak havoc, yet the body of the Yuanfu cultivator didn't move. The ancient halberd was still embedded in his throat, and his eyes were wide open. Evidently, he hadn't expected that his opponent would be able to pierce the ancient halberd into his throat at the critical moment. Mo Qingcheng had also dealt with her opponent. She walked to the side of Qin Wentian, retrieved a medicinal pill, and fed it to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian swallowed the pill, and looking at the nervous Mo Qingcheng, a smile appeared on his face as he replied, "I'm fine." Although he was smiling, Qin Wentian didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless in his heart. He knew that this refinement grounds wouldn't be easy. Awesome. Ouyang Guangxing cast a deep glance at Qin Wentian. That strike earlier was extremely beautiful, and he knew that if he were to kill his opponent, although he wouldn't be injured, the amount of astral energy he would have to expend would be much more than what Qin Wentian had. However, the refinement grounds was a race of life and death. Even if he suffered some injuries, he wouldn't want to expend too much astral energy. Qin Wentian naturally understood this logic. Hence, even if he was injured, he still wanted to kill his opponent. Not only that, Qin Wentian knew that Mo Qingcheng had some healing pills on her. Nodding his head to Ouyang Guangxing, Qin Wentian didn't say anything else. If we were outside, I would definitely look for you to test it out. Huh? Ouyang Guangxing laughed as he departed. Evidently, he was going to look for his own team. In here, although Ouyang Guangxing was very confident in his own strength, he knew that if he chose to act alone at the start of the refinement grounds, it would definitely be fatal. The later stages of the refinement grounds didn't matter, because only 7 people could obtain the Celestial Lake. Hence, in this dangerous refinement grounds, there would always be people dying. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing left the area. After all, there were still corpses lying around, so they chose a different location to rest and recuperate. Qin Wentian gave Mo Qingqing a few Yuan meteor stones. In here, they could only rely on the energy of the Yuan meteor stones to recover some of their strength. A rustling sound rang out, causing Qin Wentian's heart to tighten as he turned his head to look behind him. "Brother Qin, so it's you." Yixiang appeared, smiling as he walked over. Qin Wentian discovered that Yixiang had quite a number of people with him, and it seemed as though they had formed an alliance. The person in the lead was a handsome young man clad in white, with an ancient sword strapped to his back. He was none other than the Swallow Swordsman, Mu Baifei, who was bestowed a seat by the palace mistress of the Celestial Lake Palace. "Brother Qin, weren't you together with those from the Green Cloud Pavilion? How did you get injured?" Yixiang glanced at Mo Qingcheng, before turning to Qin Wentian. Although Yixiang's personality was extremely cordial, Qin Wentian was still wary of him. Nodding his head, he replied, "I met with an ambush, and was slightly injured. Without the Green Cloud Pavilion, I'm afraid that Brother Qin and Mo Qingqing would be in even more danger. How about this? I'll help you too, and plead for you two to join our alliance." Yixiang spoke to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian pondered for a moment, glancing at Mo Qingqing, before eventually nodding his head. Even if he had to sacrifice himself, he had to ensure Mo Qingqing's safety. If the two of them were to act alone, it would indeed be extremely dangerous. "Don't worry, it's rare for us to meet by fate. Leave it to me," Yixiang heroically stated, after which he ran over to Mu Baifei's side to discuss some matters. After which, he waved his hands towards Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing walked over to the group of cultivators. There were a total of 18 cultivators in this alliance, and it was a formidable lineup. However, Qin Wentian was clear that this was only the beginning of the refinement grounds. Although they could form strong alliances to ensure their safety, at the end of the refinement grounds, the alliance would definitely crumble apart. Mu Baifei's group consisted of 3 swallow swordsmen, and all of them carried ancient swords on their backs. They were extremely arrogant, and didn't even glance at Qin Wentian. In fact, Mu Baifei didn't even care about these allies of his. It was only a temporary measure, and the others were clear about this point as well. However, they still had this little bit of forbearance. Not to mention, the swallow swordsmen were already extremely famous, so it didn't matter much to them. With such a strong lineup, they didn't meet with any trouble along the way. Occasionally, they would see a few corpses along the way. Finally, after 2 days, they exited the forest. However, what appeared in front of them was an ancient mountain path. Towering mountain peaks stood in front of them, and there were many ancient paths that they could tread on. "Who's going to scout ahead?" one of the swallow swordsmen beside Mu Baifei asked, his tone cold and aloof. "Brother Qin, I'll have to trouble you." Yixiang smiled as he looked at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian narrowed his eyes as he stared at Yixiang. However, it only lasted for an instant before his expression returned to normal. "Don't worry, Brother Qin. The 2 of them will accompany you. If there's an ambush, we'll rush over immediately." Yixiang pointed to the other 2, causing them to frown. "Right." Qin Wentian nodded. "I'll go with you." Mo Qingqing stepped forward and pulled Qin Wentian's hand. It's fine if there's no need for so many people. Yixiang laughed. Qin Wentian turned his head back and glanced at him. After which, he held Mo Qingqing's hand and continued forward, ignoring the people behind them. He didn't want to stay in this alliance any longer. Yixiang narrowed his eyes as a cold glint of light flickered in his pupils. Yixiang, what are you thinking in your head? Yixiang's companion unhappily asked. She had seen Mo Qingqing's countenance before, and yet Yixiang wanted Qin Wentian to scout ahead, while hoping that Mo Qingqing would stay behind. It was hard not to have wild thoughts. In the Celestial Lake Palace, on a jade throne sat an extremely beautiful and seductive lady. However, when she opened her eyes, there was a hint of coldness in them, akin to that of a queen. Her beautiful eyes stared at the curtains in front of her. The scenes displayed on the curtains were actually scenes of the refinement grounds. Beside the cold queen stood two people. One was the palace mistress of the Celestial Lake Palace, and the other was the otherworldly beauty. Her demeanor was somewhat similar to that of the lady seated on the jade throne. At this moment, the eyes of the cold queen were fixed on Qin Wentian. This young man was rumored to be from the Chu country. Chu. Back then when the Azure Emperor disappeared, the Azure Emperor Palace was in a precarious situation. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the Azure Emperor Palace, and everyone was closely monitored. However, no one found what they wanted. Only recently did some news leak out. Before the Azure Emperor died, he actually went to a place named Chu. At this moment, the cold queen's lips curled into a cold smile. Those arrogant fellows, did they really think that they could find the thing left behind by the Azure Emperor? Even if they found the painting, what use would it be? There was also her, guarding this place, guarding the last checkpoint. Will a new emperor appear in the Azure Emperor Palace? The cold queen murmured, causing the palace mistress to tremble slightly. However, the countenance of the absolute beauty didn't change in the slightest, as though she would always be like this. Chapter 184. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing walked on the ancient path, only to discover that this path was extremely smooth, and they didn't meet with any danger. After walking for a long time, they discovered that the ancient paths gradually converged into a single path. As they continued forward, there were several people standing there, staring ahead. Ouyang Guangxing, no wonder this path is so smooth. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing stopped at the point where the ancient paths converged. If they continued forward, they would see another ancient path. However, at the bottom of the ancient path, there were several corpses that had died miserably. Their bodies were covered in blood, dyeing the ancient path red. Boom. Qin Wentian felt the blood in his body throbbing as his heart pounded. Lifting his head, he saw a stone tablet 10 meters above the ancient path, with the words Yellow Springs engraved on it. How marvelous! Mo Qingqing similarly felt her blood pounding, causing her heart to tremble. The Yellow Springs ancient path actually appeared in this trial. It's rumored that as long as one encountered the Yellow Springs ancient path during the refinement grounds, they would have to turn back and find another path. The countenances of those present were extremely unsightly to behold. The ancient paths finally converged here, which meant that all the participants of the refinement grounds would arrive at this place. If one didn't dare to pass, they would have to turn back and turn back. But if one chose to pass the Yellow Springs ancient path, it would be a shortcut. I don't believe that the Yellow Springs ancient path is so evil. One of the participants spoke in an unconvinced tone. After which, he took a step forward, albeit cautiously. Boom. The blood in his body throbbed as he felt his blood boiling. Taking another step forward, the blood vessels in that person's body became visible, as his countenance turned ashen. Releasing his astral souls, his body was enveloped by astral light as he continued forward. Boom. The blood in his body throbbed unceasingly, as his heart pounded madly. His face turned blood red, as terror could be seen on his countenance. The thumping sounds continued unceasingly, as his heartbeat grew faster and faster. Retreat. A thought appeared in his mind, as he retreated. However, the blood in his body throbbed more and more violently, and finally, a scream of agony rang out. Those behind only saw his blood vessels rupturing, as fresh blood splattered onto the ground. His entire body was a mangled mess. "Let's turn back," Jiang Ting, who was standing beside Ouyang Quangxing, spoke. "I passed by the Yellow Springs. If I can cross it, I will definitely enter the Celestial Pond. I want to give it a try." Only to see Ouyang Quangxing exuding a heroic aura as he stepped forward. Jiang Ting's countenance changed. "Quangxing, don't be impulsive." "Jiang Ting, you guys changed paths." "Don't worry about me." Ouyang Quangxing laughed uproariously as he advanced forwards. The blood in his body was similarly boiling as his heart pounded. Ouyang Quangxing's bloodline limit surged as he advanced. His footsteps were incomparably resolute, and his entire person exuded an aura of indomitable will. What was the difference between the road and the Yellow Springs? Once they stepped on it, they would never return. Either they stepped on it, or they died on the road to the Yellow Springs. Those from the Ouyang aristocrat clan and Jiang clan were all extremely nervous as they stared at their young master. Ouyang Quangxing's weakness was that he was too arrogant and had no scruples. As long as he set his mind on something, nobody would be able to stop him. Even if it was the Yellow Springs path, he would still walk it. Between the road and the Yellow Springs, turning back to see the shore is still there, but he refused to turn back. "If I die, you better find a good family." Ouyang Quangxing had already arrived at the foot of the Yellow Springs monument. His countenance didn't change, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. Jiang Ting's heart pounded in tandem with Ouyang Quangxing's actions. Ouyang Quangxing released his astral souls as he halted his steps. Jiang Ting's heart leapt up to her throat, yet Ouyang Quangxing continued advancing, as though it was extremely difficult for him to do so. Gradually, Ouyang Quangxing moved further and further away from the Yellow Springs monument. Finally, he turned and smiled at Jiang Ting and the rest. "Go on." "MHM." Jiang Ting and the rest nodded their heads heavily as they turned and returned to the ancient pathway. "What should we do?" Mo Qingqing inclined her head and stared at Qin Wentian. "I want to give it a try." Qin Wentian stared at Mo Qingqing, causing her to freeze for a moment. However, a smile soon appeared on her face as she replied, "I'll accompany you then." "No, wait for me here. If I can't make it, I'll come back." Qin Wentian pinched Mo Qingqing's nose as he smiled, not wanting her to worry too much. "Okay." Mo Qingqing nodded her head. After which, she saw Qin Wentian turning and walking towards the Yellow Springs monument. His heartbeat quickened as the power of his bloodline began to surge. The reason why Qin Wentian wanted to give it a try was because he could feel his bloodline throbbing under the Yellow Springs monument. Such a feeling made him yearn for it. Qin Wentian's heart pounded madly, but he didn't notice that behind him, Mo Qingqing had already taken a few steps forward. Qin Wentian faintly felt that he was about to lose control of the power of his bloodline. His long hair turned black as it fluttered in the wind. The blood in his veins seemed to be seething with power, seething with rage and rage. Finally, he arrived at the foot of the Yellow Springs monument. Stopping, he closed his eyes as he sensed the power of his bloodline. It was as though there were blood-colored runes dancing about within his body. These blood-colored runes contained a terrifying amount of energy and exuded an aura of a king. "Is this the materialization of the power of my bloodline?" Qin Wentian's heart trembled. He could actually sense the power of his bloodline. He had a feeling that in the future, he would be able to control this power to his heart's desire and infuse it into his attacks. This was like an advancement of his bloodline. Inclining his head, Qin Wentian's eyes were as red as blood, filled with a tyrannical aura. His bloodline was the true bloodline of a king. How could it be affected by the Yellow Springs monument? The blood-colored runes shot up into the air, shooting towards the Yellow Springs monument. In that instant, boundless blood-colored light radiated from the monument, gushing towards Qin Wentian, as though they were clashing against each other. This scene caused Mo Qingqing's countenance to turn as pale as paper. Her heart was burning with anxiety. She bit her lips, causing fresh blood to seep out. She took a step forward, her heart pounding as her blood surged. At this moment, Qin Wentian had no idea what Mo Qingqing was doing. He could only see the blood-colored runes in his body rushing towards the monument. Gradually, the monument quieted down. Mo Qingqing could feel that the power of the monument was getting weaker and weaker. She inclined her head and glanced at the monument, only to see it descending downwards, landing in front of Qin Wentian. There was no longer any tyrannical power within it. He's actually able to control the monument. An expression of astonishment appeared on Qin Wentian's face. He could feel a mysterious connection being established between him and the monument. After which, with an intention of his will, he stored the monument into his interspatial ring. Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes flickered. This? Ouyang Guangxing turned his head and stared at this scene. He was also dumbfounded. Qin Wentian had actually subdued the Yellow Springs monument? Qin Wentian calmed the power of his bloodline as he turned and walked towards Mo Qingqing's side. Upon seeing the traces of blood on her lips, he couldn't help but feel moved in his heart. Silly lass. Qin Wentian cupped Mo Qingqing's cheeks in his hands. However, Mo Qingqing merely smiled and said, "Let's go." "MHM." Qin Wentian nodded his head. The sound of footsteps drifted over as a group of people walked out from a nearby pathway. Upon seeing Qin Wentian and Qian Mingyu, they were both stunned. "Are you all right?" Qian Mingyu stared at Qin Wentian in bewilderment. She had initially thought that Qin Wentian would be the one to suffer from the ambush. "My luck isn't bad." Qin Wentian laughed. "Let's go together." Staring at the three people behind Qian Mingyu, Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. It seemed like their group had suffered heavy casualties. Only 4 people remained. "Okay." Qian Mingyu nodded her head as the group continued on their way, glancing at the corpses on the ground, as well as Ouyang Guangxing standing in front of them. They assumed that this was the work of Ouyang Guangxing. Ouyang Guangxing bitterly smiled. When encountering the Yellow Springs, one could always turn back to the shore. For those who passed the Yellow Springs pathway, they would definitely be able to enter the Celestial Lake. But this time around, the barrier was broken. That freak had directly cleared the pathway, and this barrier wouldn't affect the rest of the people behind. In this case, the Yellow Springs pathway, which should have been able to obstruct many people, was now completely unknown. Turning, Ouyang Guangxing continued on his way, hoping that he would be the first to reach the Celestial Lake. Qin Wentian and the rest also quickened their pace, following behind Ouyang Guangxing. A few moments later, they had already exited the pathway. Those from the Green Cloud Pavilion pulled Qian Mingyu along, lagging behind Ouyang Guangxing and Qin Wentian. This caused Qian Mingyu's countenance to stiffen, as she understood their intentions. Most probably, they were worried that Ouyang Guangxing would kill them. After Ouyang Guangxing and Qin Wentian exited the pathway, they saw that there were 2 ancient trees on both sides of the pathway. Astral light could be seen circulating on the branches of the ancient trees, and there were actually fruits on the branches. Haha, as expected of a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Ouyang Guangxing instantly dashed towards one of the ancient trees, leaping onto it as he rapidly plucked the fruits. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing exchanged glances, before sprinting towards the other ancient tree and started plucking the fruits. Their speed was extremely fast, and by the time Qian Mingyu and the rest arrived, they had already harvested half of the fruits. Stellar fruits. Those from the Nebula Pavilion were startled, as they instantly rushed towards the ancient tree. "What's the use of this stellar fruit?" Qin Wentian asked Qian Mingyu. The stellar fruit is a fruit that can only be found in a specific space. It can rapidly replenish one's astral energy, and is considered a treasure in this refinement grounds. Ouyang Guangxing had already finished plucking the fruits from the ancient tree, as he involuntarily explained to Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian's eyes brightened, as he stared at those from the Nebula Pavilion. "There are quite a few fruits on this ancient tree. Let's split them evenly according to the number of people." "Why should we split them evenly?" The female cultivator beside Qian Mingyu stared at Qin Wentian, as a sharp glint of light flickered in her eyes. Qin Wentian's eyes froze, as he stared at the other party. "What do you mean?" "By allowing you to follow us, we are already taking care of you. Naturally, we will be the ones to decide how to split the fruits." That female cultivator coldly replied, as she stared at Qin Wentian with disdain. This fellow was truly indulging in the wildest fantasies, actually wanting to split the fruits equally. In her heart, Qin Wentian following them was already a form of grace from the Green Cloud Pavilion towards Qin Wentian. Back then, if it wasn't for them blocking the alliance of the Beast King Hall and Celestial Palace, how could Qin Wentian still be alive? You mean to say that you don't intend to split the fruits equally? Qin Wentian's voice grew colder. He was the first to obtain the stellar fruits, and he had suggested to split them equally. Yet not only did the other party not appreciate his kindness, they even felt that he was being greedy. Ouyang Guangxing was also stunned, as an expression of interest appeared on his face. They wanted to take care of Qin Wentian? Forming an alliance was originally beneficial to both parties, and if they were to encounter danger, they would share the burden together. But from the other party's words, it seemed like they were taking care of Qin Wentian, and the rest out of charity. Brother Qin, if you want to split the fruits, you should split them equally with us. At this moment, another group of silhouettes appeared on the ancient pathway. They were none other than Mu Baifei and the rest. And the one who spoke was none other than Yi Xiang. His eyes narrowed. The importance of the stellar fruits in the refinement grounds was self-evident. Qin Wentian cast a glance at Yi Xiang and the rest. Indeed, these people weren't the kindest of people. Chapter 185. Qin Wentian knew that the matter regarding the stellar fruits wouldn't end peacefully. His gaze landed on Qianmingyu. He wasn't that familiar with the Green Cloud Pavilion, he only knew of Qianmingyu. What do you think? Qin Wentian asked. Miss Mingyu, this man has been under our care. By right, we should be the ones to distribute the stellar fruits. Not only that. As she spoke, she cast a glance at Mu Baifei and the rest. These people were like tigers eyeing their prey. With the stellar fruits, it would undoubtedly make up for their disadvantage in numbers. With her Yuanfu realm cultivation base, as long as she had enough stellar fruits, she would be able to unleash some powerful innate techniques. Qianmingyu furrowed her brows as she stared into Qin Wentian's eyes. Forget it, since we are acquaintances, let's split the fruits equally. Qianmingyu didn't want to haggle too much. Not only that, there were 4 of them, while Qin Wentian only had 2. Even if they split the fruits equally, they would still get the most. Maybe in Qianmingyu's heart, she also felt that they should be the ones to distribute the fruits. After all, compared to them, Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing were the weaker party. If it was someone else, they wouldn't even think of splitting the fruits, and would directly deal with Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing instead. Qin Wentian was no longer as simple and honest as he was in the past. The moment he heard Qianmingyu's words, he instantly knew what she was thinking. However, the female cultivator beside Qianmingyu interjected. No way, Mississippi. Now that there are external enemies, if we split the fruits equally with him, wouldn't it be the same as gifting the fruits to others? Don't tell me you expect them to resist? This female cultivator had delicate features and could be considered quite beautiful. However, the expression on her face caused Qin Wentian to feel a sense of loathing. He grabbed a few stellar fruits and passed them to Qianmingyu. Don't worry, I won't implicate your Green Cloud Pavilion. Take these fruits as a gift from me. After which, he shifted his gaze onto the other 3 as he coldly stated. Since you guys like to split the fruits so clearly, why should I give them to you? If you want to snatch them away, I'm more than happy to oblige. Qin Wentian held Mo Qingqing's hand and walked away. Obviously, he was also angered. You ungrateful thing. If it weren't for us, would you still be alive? The woman's eyes flashed with killing intent as she pointed a finger at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian was too impudent. Shut up. Qin Wentian scolded and said coldly. When we were besieged, the 2 of us attracted the pursuit of 5 experts. Didn't we solve the problem ourselves? When did we need your protection? Hee, brother Qin, let's put your business aside for now. I'll introduce you to our alliance. Are you going to hand over the star fruits? Yi Xiang said coldly. Once they saw a treasure, these people couldn't wait any longer. After all, no one knew what would happen in the celestial pool trial. Qin Wentian glanced at Ouyang Guangxing. No one dared to cause trouble for him. And not only that, Ouyang Guangxing had obtained so many star fruits. These people all treated him like a soft persimmon, easy to bully. You're thinking too much. Qin Wentian glanced at Yi Xiang, before bringing Mo Qingqing along as they advanced. Hee hee, hand over all the star fruits you guys have. Beside Mu Baifei, a swallow swordsman walked out, staring at those from the Green Cloud Pavilion as well as Qin Wentian as he calmly stated. His eyes shone with an innate arrogance, as though he had no one in his eyes. Let's go. Qin Wentian held on to Mo Qingqing's hand as he sprinted forwards. He didn't want to waste time with these people. Let's go too. Qian Mingyu also spoke, as they sprinted forwards as well. The swallow swordsman coldly laughed, as the rest of the swallow swordsmen chased after him. Ouyang Guangxing stood there, an expression of interest on his face. He had heard that the appearance of the stellar fruits in the celestial pool trial would always incite conflict. In the eyes of everyone, the stellar fruits were treasures, but wasn't their existence a calamity? Maybe it was a test in itself. Turning his head, Ouyang Guangxing saw several silhouettes sprinting over. He saw those from the Beast King Hall, Sky Demon Sect, and even those from the Wang clan of the War Continent. Ouyang Guangxing. Those from the Wang clan halted their steps, only to see Wang Xiao glancing at Ouyang Guangxing. After which, a sharp glint of light flashed in his eyes as he asked, "You obtain the stellar fruits?" Ouyang Guangxing glanced at Wang Xiao. He knew that when this fellow went crazy, everyone would have to be wary of him. His lips curled into a cold smile as he sprinted forwards as well. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing were at the very front, but very quickly, their countenances turned unsightly. In front of them, there was a gigantic mountain rampart that pierced through the clouds. It was unknown how tall it was, but there was only a single path in the middle of it. However, at this moment, a terrifying suction force emanated from that path, as a hurricane that could tear space apart howled in rage. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing halted their steps, as their countenances turned unsightly as they stared at the rampart in front of them. Take this, be careful. Qin Wentian retrieved a few stellar fruits and stuffed them into Mo Qingqing's hands. Mo Qingqing lightly nodded her head, and the two of them turned, only to see a cloud of dust in the distance. The first to arrive were those from the clear jade pavilion, and when they saw the silhouettes in the distance, their countenances turned unsightly as well. There was actually a rampart here. If that was the case, it would be unavoidable for the experts who arrived here to clash against each other. And since they possessed the stellar fruits, they would be the first to suffer the impact. Mu Baifei and the rest had arrived. However, they weren't in a hurry to act. They had also discovered that there were people running towards them from behind. And not too long later, many experts had already arrived at the rampart of the towering mountain. Ouyang Guangxing glanced at the crowd before shifting his gaze onto Qin Wentian. This was all Qin Wentian's fault. If he hadn't taken the Yellow Springs Monument away, none of these people would have been able to reach this point. Qian Mingyu from the Green Cloud Pavilion. Hand that item over. Mu Baifei took a step forward as he stared at Qian Mingyu. His voice contained a faint hint of arrogance, and the two swallow swordsmen beside him simultaneously stepped out. An intense surge of sword intent gushed forth, gushing towards the four from the Green Cloud Pavilion. We'll only know after we try. Qian Mingyu's countenance was extremely unsightly to behold. Mu Baifei and the other two continued forward, their sword qi growing even stronger. After which, they released their astral souls as a resplendent sword intent permeated the air. The swallow swordsmen all had sword-type astral souls. However, there were differences in their sword-type astral souls, because the astral souls they condensed were all different. The three of them advanced shoulder to shoulder, and with a single point of their fingers, millions upon millions of sharp swords whistled through the air, exterminating everything in their path. A terrifying sword tempest could be felt, slaying anyone who obstructed their path. What a powerful sword qi! The crowd was stunned. A sword also appeared in Qian Mingyu's hands. She was proficient in the 9 swords of life. Her sword danced in the air, growing and multiplying endlessly as it slashed out. At the same time, the female cultivator beside her also launched her own attack, clashing against the terrifying sword tempest. Swish, swish, swish. The sound of intense sword qi whistling through the air was exceptionally ear-piercing, as the entire battlefield was enveloped by a tempest. The 3 swallow swordsmen continued advancing, and with every step they took, boundless sword qi would radiate from their bodies. Their fingers unceasingly stabbed out, and the terrifying sword intent they exuded seemed to be stacking on top of each other, growing stronger and stronger. Qin Wentian silently mused in his heart, as expected of swordsmen from transcendent powers. Any one of these three swallow swordsmen would be able to dominate the entire Junlin banquet in Chu. In fact, they were even stronger compared to him when he participated in the Junlin banquet back then. But now, Qin Wentian didn't feel that he was weaker than them. The Qin Wentian now was many times stronger compared to him during the Junlin banquet. Brother Qin, you've also seen the strength of the swallow swordsman. A wise man submits to circumstances. It's not too late to hand them over now. Yi Xiang walked to the side of Qin Wentian, as he spoke in a low voice, as though he was a vile character. Qin Wentian swept a glance at Yi Xiang, as he spat out a single word, scram. Yi Xiang's countenance sank, as his countenance turned sinister. He stared at Qin Wentian, before shifting his gaze onto Mo Qingcheng. Brother Qin, it's fine if you die, but don't implicate Mo Qingcheng. Qin Wentian stared at Yi Xiang, and upon seeing his countenance, a sharp glint of coldness flickered in his eyes, causing Yi Xiang to feel a sense of dread. That gentle youth, when frowning in anger, actually gave off a formless pressure. We'll hand them over. And at this moment, on the other side of the battlefield, Qian Mingyu and her companions were forced into a corner by the three swallow swordsmen. They had no way to retreat. As the sword qi grew stronger and stronger, they could only agree to hand over the stellar fruits. Puchi. Fresh blood splattered as one of the swallow swordsmen behind Qian Mingyu was pierced through by the sword light, dying on the spot. This caused Qian Mingyu's countenance to stiffen, as her countenance turned incomparably ugly to behold. At the same time, the sword qi dissipated as Mu Baifei calmly stated. If you knew this would happen, why did you resist? His voice was still filled with arrogance as he stretched out his hands towards Qian Mingyu. Qian Mingyu's countenance turned ashen as she retrieved all the stellar fruits in her possession, tossing them over to Mu Baifei. Only then did those who arrived later understood that this was a competition for the stellar fruits. I don't think there's only this much, Mu Baifei calmly stated. After which, the female swallow swordsman beside Qian Mingyu pointed to Qin Wentian. The rest are in his hands, while the rest of the stellar fruits are with Ouyang Guangxing. If you have the ability, go ahead and take them. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows, only to see Mu Baifei turning his gaze towards him as he calmly stated. Where are the stellar fruits? His gaze was still filled with arrogance. He wanted all of the stellar fruits. If not, there wouldn't even be enough for them to split amongst themselves. Hee, Brother Qin, if you really infuriate Brother Mu, I'm afraid you won't even be able to keep your life. Yi Xiang continued, as though he was a fox borrowing the tiger's might. Do you believe that I won't take your life first? Qin Wentian's eyes flashed with a demonic light. His calm voice caused Yi Xiang's countenance to stiffen. As his countenance grew increasingly unsightly, he should have quite a few stellar fruits on him. You guys can split them amongst yourselves. Mu Baifei spoke to his followers, causing their eyes to flicker with a bright light. Evidently Mu Baifei knew that in this situation, he wasn't the only one who wanted the stellar fruits. There were other transcendent powers as well. If it was just the three of them, it would be impossible for them to monopolize the stellar fruits. Not only that, based on their arrogance, they wouldn't stoop so low as to kill a nameless nobody. Qin Wentian seemed to be a follower of the Green Cloud Pavilion. Chapter 186. The gazes of Yi Xiang and the rest all landed on Qin Wentian, only to see a few of them walking towards Qin Wentian. Brother Qin, don't blame us if you don't know what's good for you. Yi Xiang faintly spoke, as killing intent gushed forth from him. He wanted to see. Qin Wentian was just an ignorant brat from a small country. What qualifications did he have to be so arrogant? He didn't even know about the Ouyang aristocrat clan, and the other transcendent powers of the 9 continents. Bzz. Yi Xiang and the rest moved, releasing their astral souls. Qin Wentian's countenance was ice-cold. How could he hand over the stellar fruits that were already in his hands? His long hair fluttered in the wind as demonic qi gushed forth. The blood in his body surged as the blood-colored runes in his body pulsated, containing a terrifying power within. Die. The two of them simultaneously rushed over. Mo Qingqing wanted to move, but Qin Wentian spoke in a low voice, "Leave it to me." As the sound of his voice faded, his silhouette transformed into a series of afterimages, instantly colliding with his opponents. Lifting his palms, he blasted out a terrifying palm imprint. The fourth stance of the Thousand Hands imprint, Kuji imprint. In the instant that the palm imprint blasted out, the space became deathly silent, burying everything in its path. Moreover, that terrifying gigantic palm imprint even contained an incomparably sharp sword will. He had blasted out the withered silence imprint with his sword divine origin energy. The countenances of the two attacking Qin Wentian froze. They could feel the pressure of that palm imprint pressing down on them, causing them to feel as though they were suffocating. It was as though the only thing left in this world was that ancient palm imprint, capable of destroying everything. The spectators stared at the palm imprint, feeling their hearts trembling in fear. This ancient palm imprint contained a terrifying amount of energy, and was even glowing with a blood-colored light, exuding the will of a king. Yi Xiang and his opponent had nowhere else to retreat, and could only use their strongest attacks to defend. However, a thunderous rumbling sound rang out as Yi Xiang's arm was instantly destroyed. A look of terror flashed in his eyes as the terrifying Kuji imprint engulfed him. Their bodies were directly crushed into pieces, not even their bones remained. How powerful! Everyone's gazes froze. That Madra just now was probably at the level of a mid-grade Earth-level spell, and it was extremely powerful. Yi Xiang and Yi Futian probably didn't even have time to reveal their trump cards before they were killed. Staring at the young man standing there, his long hair turned black, incomparably demonic. The demonic aura exuding from him was extremely intense, and the blood in his body churned intensely, as though he was a king looking down on the world. It was just that the youth was still young. If he was a bit more mature and stronger, the aura of a king would be even more impactful. The power of his bloodline might be an extremely powerful bloodline. The countenances of Qian Mingyu and the others from the Green Cloud Pavilion were all extremely fascinating. Qian Mingyu silently mused that she had still underestimated Qin Wentian's combat prowess. Qin Wentian could feel the blood-red runes within his body pulsating, and he felt a surge of power coursing through his body. The blood-red runes contained a bloodline power that could be directly fused into his attacks, releasing a terrifying might. So what if you've obtained the star fruits? Can't you see the current situation clearly? Do you think the Swallow Swordsman will bring you into the Celestial Pond? Take a look at the number of experts behind you. Qin Wentian swept his gaze across the crowd, causing their countenances to stiffen as they turned their heads to glance at him, their hearts filled with trepidation. Don't be a bridal gown for others. If you insist on being stubborn, I'm afraid all of you will die here. An ancient halberd appeared in Qin Wentian's hands as he stabbed it into the ground beside him. What arrogant words! Upon hearing Qin Wentian's words, Mu Baifei indifferently remarked. His white robes fluttered in the wind as sword qi gushed forth from him. As he stared at Qin Wentian. Capture him. Mu Baifei spat out another command, his voice as calm as ever. The arrogance of a swallow swordsman was just as strong as ever. The two swordsmen beside him walked towards Qin Wentian, releasing their astral souls. Sword qi gushed forth from their bodies as they pointed towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian stared at the two swordsmen. Wielding the ancient halberd in his hands, he similarly stepped forward. With every step he took, the aura he exuded grew stronger and stronger. His eyes seemed to be able to cause people to sink into them. The two white-robed swordsmen stabbed out with their fingers. Sword qi gushed forth, tearing apart the void as tens of thousands of beams of sword light swept forth. Qin Wentian's ancient halberd danced in the air as the Xuanwu shadow flickered, unmoving. Umph! The two swallow swordsmen coldly laughed. Pointing their fingers in the air, two resplendent swords slashed downwards, wanting to cleave apart the void. Blood-colored inscriptions danced about, fusing into the innate technique. Qin Wentian's defense grew even stronger as a crimson glow flickered within. He took another step forward, not retreating but advancing instead, suppressing his opponent. The swallow swordsmen coldly snorted as they similarly advanced forward. Both their hands slashed out horizontally as the intertwining beams of sword light grew increasingly stronger. In that instant, Qin Wentian's ancient halberd exploded outwards. The Xuanwu turtle howled in rage as it dashed forwards. A crimson glow engulfed the heavens and earth, blocking all the sword qi. Qin Wentian's silhouette flickered as his ancient halberd transformed into a resplendent beam of light, breaking apart all obstructions. The two swordsmen placed their palms behind their backs and instantly unsheathed their swords. This was the first time the swords of the swordsmen had been unsheathed. Silvery light flashed, piercing the eyes of the onlookers. The two swords simultaneously pierced out, colliding with the ancient halberd. A terrifying sword qi hurricane howled in the air, as the surging energy from the ancient halberd caused the swords to tremble. The swordsmen were forced to retreat, their countenances involuntarily stiffening. The power contained within Qin Wentian's attack was truly terrifying. However, in the blink of an eye, their swords danced about once more as the sword qi they emitted grew increasingly stronger. The two swordsmen were akin to streaks of light as they slashed out. Mu Baifei glanced at the ancient halberd in Qin Wentian's hands. That was obviously a divine weapon, and it could amplify the already powerful attacks of Qin Wentian even further. Mu Baifei's silhouette was like the wind, the humming of his sword as he unsheathed it. His sword was like a shadow of light, striking out at the same time as the other two swordsmen. From 3 different angles, 3 beams of light shot out, aiming to reap away Qin Wentian's life. What an undeserved reputation! Ouyang Guangxing spat out as a look of disdain appeared on his face. The swallow swordsmen were proficient in their attacks, yet they were still suppressed by Qin Wentian. Now 3 against 1, even if they won, the one to lose face would be Mu Baifei. Mu Baifei obviously knew that his actions this time around wouldn't be very honorable. Hence, he had to take Qin Wentian's life with this strike. Qin Wentian felt an intense sense of danger. Brandishing the ancient halberd in his hands, he didn't unleash any innate techniques, but rather, used it to block the incoming attack. Indeed, although Mu Baifei's sword seemed to be far away, it had already collided with the ancient halberd. If Qin Wentian had been a step slower, the sword would have pierced through his throat. Borrowing the force of the impact, Qin Wentian executed the Garuda movement technique. His footwork was incomparably exquisite, as he retreated like a phantom. The swords of the other two swordsmen pierced through Qin Wentian's body. The terrifying whistling sound of their swords scraped against Qin Wentian's face, causing him to feel a little sticky. Qin Wentian, who was retreating, touched his face. There was a drop of blood on it, an injury caused by the sword qi earlier. Swallow swordsman? Qin Wentian inclined his head, staring at the 3 in front of him. An expression of mockery could be seen on his face as he coldly stated, "Merely so." As he spoke, the expressions on the faces of the spectators turned extremely fascinating. Qin Wentian's strength was indeed very powerful, to be able to block an attack from Mu Baifei and his 2 companions. Mu Baifei raised his sword horizontally, as he calmly replied, "Is that so?" As the sound of his voice faded, the sword qi from his body exploded forth, becoming even stronger. Upon witnessing this scene on the other side, several people walked towards Mo Qingqing. Mo Qingqing was the companion of Qin Wentian. She should also have some Yuan meteor stones on her. However, a silhouette suddenly appeared in front of Mo Qingqing. This silhouette was clad in black, and her exquisite figure gave off a breathtaking feeling. Qin Wentian wanted to take a look at her face, yet she was wearing a conical bamboo hat, and a veil covering her face. There was no way to see her true features, only a pair of bright eyes could be seen. When this silhouette appeared, a group of people dressed in the same attire appeared beside her, standing in front of Mo Qingqing, as though they were intentionally protecting her. However, other than the person in the lead, the others didn't conceal their faces. Those from the Mystic Moon Hall want to join in the fun as well. Mu Baifei's countenance flashed with a strange light as he stared at the situation. Those from the Mystic Moon Hall had always been mysterious, and the innate techniques they cultivated were all extremely unique. Hence, the majority of them were female. The Mystic Moon Hall of the Spirit Continent was one of the transcendent powers of the Grand Xia Empire. Qin Wentian was initially worried about Mo Qingqing, but upon seeing the appearance of those from the Mystic Moon Hall, he heaved a sigh of relief. However, he couldn't help but feel puzzled in his heart. Mo Qingqing was someone from Chu, and it was impossible for her to have any interactions with the Mystic Moon Hall of the 9 continents. A woman from the Mystic Moon Hall? Shiki from the Beast King Hall stared at Mo Qingqing as his eyes brightened. At this moment, although Mo Qingqing was concealing her true appearance, he had seen the beautiful side of Mo Qingqing. Now that he saw the guards from the Mystic Moon Hall standing in front of her, he immediately assumed that Mo Qingqing was an important character from the Mystic Moon Hall. He go. Shiki coldly stated. Instantly, those from the Beast King Hall lunged forward, as a terrifying demonic chi permeated the air. A bunch of vile beasts. Someone from the Mystic Moon Hall mocked. In the Beast King Hall, there were many who possessed the bloodline of beastmen. This mocking voice caused them to go even more berserk, as both sides instantly clashed against each other. You are mine. Shiki dashed towards Mo Qingqing, his demonic chi billowing. Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes flashed with a cold light as she released her astral souls. Her beautiful wings shone with a resplendent light. Her cultivation base was at the Yuanfu realm, and although her Yuanfu was sealed, she still had an advantage when compared to cultivators at the arterial circulation realm. Qin Wentian gazed in the direction of Shiki, as a terrifying glint of light flickered in his eyes. In his heart, he had already sentenced Shiki to death for betraying him. Shiki opened his mouth and swallowed a stellar fruit. A terrifying sword chi tore through the air as the swallow swordsman walked over. It's still not too late if you guys stop now, Qin Wentian coldly stated as he stared at the 3 of them. He was worried that Mo Qingqing would be in trouble. Today, you will die for sure. Mu Baifei calmly stated, his tone filled with certainty. The 3 of them acted together to deal with Qin Wentian. If Qin Wentian didn't die, where would his reputation go? In the future, he wouldn't be able to lift his head up high in front of his peers in the 9 continents. Right now, all of them only had 1 foot in Yuanfu. In just a year or 2 more, the 9 continents would be the place for people of their generation to shine. Since you want to die, I shall grant you your wish. Qin Wentian stabbed the ancient halberd in his hands into the ground beside him. Abruptly, a terrifying storm of sword chi gushed forth from his body. To the astonishment of the crowd, Qin Wentian's entire body shimmered with resplendent astral swords. Countless swords enveloped Qin Wentian, emitting a humming sound as a fearsome sharpness permeated the air. Chapter 187. Sword Chi. Mu Baifei and the other 2 frowned. Qin Wentian's entire body was enveloped by boundless sword light, transforming into numerous sharp astral swords that emitted a whistling sound, exuding a bone-piercing sharpness. Each and every one of the astral swords exuded an indomitable sharpness, advancing forward with indomitable will. What a pleasant surprise! The crowd stared at Qin Wentian in bewilderment. This fellow wasn't someone from a transcendent power, yet his combat prowess was actually so strong. Not only that, Qin Wentian's aura hadn't stopped rising. Numerous blood-colored runes danced about, enveloping the surface of his sword. The sword light was as red as blood, exuding a demonic aura. And now, Qin Wentian's aura was akin to that of the blood sword sovereign. The demonic aura he exuded grew stronger and stronger. Since you wish to die, I shall grant you your wish. Qin Wentian's voice resounded in the air, incomparably tyrannical. He wanted the swallow swordsman to die. Boom. Finally, as Mu Baifei and the other 2 swallow swordsmen advanced, Qin Wentian took a step forward. With this step, the swords roared, and the countless swords of stars gathered together, transforming into waves of swords, sword vortexes that wanted to devour everything. Mu Baifei's countenance finally changed as he roared in rage, sword keening. As the sound of his voice faded, the boundless sword light from the 3 swallow swordsmen also converged together. The swords in their hands clashed together as terrifying hums rang out, trembling unceasingly. The sword intent in the air converged together, transforming into the hums of their swords. It was as though their swords were stacking together, as though they had a life of their own. The swallow swordsmen were actually forced to use a combination attack when facing Qin Wentian's attack. Die! The sword-type divine energy around Qin Wentian howled as it gushed forth, forming a terrifying sword vortex that swallowed everything in its path. Thousands of swords protected him, transforming into the most powerful sword attack he could muster, causing the spectators to tremble in fear. Leaving aside the fact that the Yuanfus of Qin Wentian's Yuanfu were all sealed, even if they were outside, such an attack was sufficient to kill Yuanfu experts. Kill! Mu Baifei and the other two roared in unison, as the humming of their swords shook the heavens, transforming into a gigantic dragon made of swords, roaring as it rushed out. This was an extremely tyrannical innate technique. Yet with just their individual swords alone, they were unable to unleash the might of the humming of the swords. Only when the three of them merged as one, using their hearts and minds as one, could they unleash such a powerful attack. From this, one could see how much pressure Qin Wentian was exerting on them. The surrounding people were dumbfounded as they watched the scene unfold. Thousands of protector swords collided with the sword vortex and the sword dragon. The space released a dazzling brilliance, and the sound of swords shook the eardrums of the crowd. Endless sword chi tore through the air, and the surrounding people quickly retreated far away. On Qin Wentian's side, a cloud of dust rose up as the sword chi tore through the earth. Mu Baifei and the other two retreated with explosive speed, their white robes torn into shreds as blood stained their robes. At this moment, their countenances were incomparably heavy, as they stared at the tyrannical Qin Wentian in front of them. Such a powerful combination of swords, yet they were still unable to suppress Qin Wentian's attack. Little did they know that at this moment, Qin Wentian was similarly taken aback. He knew in his heart how powerful this strike of his was. The incomparably vast amount of sword-type divine energy transformed into terrifying divine inscriptions, in addition to his tyrannical physique, as well as the blood-colored runic inscriptions. This was an attack he had prepared specifically for Yuanfu cultivators, yet it still failed to kill Mu Baifei and the other two. This strike caused Qin Wentian to expend a great deal of energy. Swallowing another stellar fruit, Qin Wentian stared at Mu Baifei. The countenances of the three swallow swordsmen were unprecedentedly heavy. They knew that this time around, they wanted to bully Qin Wentian into taking out the stellar fruits, yet they had kicked an iron board instead. They were swallow swordsmen from the Yen continent, and were extremely confident in their own strength. Yet a nameless nobody had actually suppressed the three of them single-handedly. Not far away, the countenances of Qian Mingyu and the other two were extremely fascinating. Qian Mingyu's countenance was filled with astonishment. So it turned out that he was actually this strong? What was laughable was that in her heart, she had thought that Qin Wentian was following them because he wanted to seek protection. What was even more laughable was that after Qin Wentian obtained the stellar fruits, he wanted to split it equally with them. However, her subordinates had suggested that the four of them should be the ones to split it. This was because Qin Wentian was merely someone they wanted to protect, a follower of theirs. Although Qian Mingyu eventually agreed to split the fruits equally, she knew that in her heart, she still harbored such thoughts. Such thoughts caused her to feel a burning sensation on her face. After all, it was Qin Wentian who suggested that they split the fruits equally. If Qin Wentian wanted to hog the fruits for himself, what could they do? Mu Baifei and the other two had used their absolute strength to suppress the four of them, and even killed one of them. But when Mu Baifei and the other two fought against Qin Wentian, they were all inferior. The female cultivator beside Qian Mingyu had been speaking rudely to Qin Wentian not long ago. Now that she witnessed Qin Wentian's strength, her countenance alternated between shades of green and white. However, Qin Wentian didn't care about what they were thinking. At this moment, he didn't continue his attacks, but was staring at Mu Baifei and the other two. That earlier strike had consumed a great deal of his energy. He could still unleash another strike, but if he did so, it would be extremely difficult for him to deal with any troubles he might encounter in the future. On the other side of the battlefield, Missouri Qingcheng wasn't at a disadvantage against Shiki. This was also the reason why Qin Wentian didn't act immediately. Those from the Mystic Moon sect held the advantage against those from the Beast King Hall. It wasn't because the overall strength of the Mystic Moon sect was superior, but rather, it was because the leader of the Mystic Moon sect, the female cultivator with a veil over her face, was extremely powerful. Her movements were akin to shadows, giving off an unfathomable feeling. Sometimes, it even felt as though she didn't exist. But the instant she appeared, the long spear of darkness in her hands would pierce through the hearts of those who fought against her. This caused many to feel fear in their hearts. The Mystic Moon sect was a transcendent power in the 9 continents, and their innate techniques were all extremely sinister and bizarre. Very few people were willing to antagonize them. It was said that the Mystic Moon sect's training for their disciples was extremely cruel. They used a method of torture to train their disciples, turning them into sharp spears in the darkness, capable of killing without leaving a trace. But at this moment, Yaoxing took a step forward. The experts from the Sky Demon sect were stirred up. Yao Sheng and Shiki had formed an alliance. Yet when the Beast King Hall was at a disadvantage, they didn't help. Instead, they waited until so many of the Beast King Hall's members had died before they acted. Such a method was truly worth pondering. Evidently, they didn't want the Beast King Hall to be at their peak strength. Yet they didn't want their allies to perish. Kill, Yao Sheng coldly stated, his gaze sweeping towards the battlefield between Qin Wentian and the Swallow Swordsman. It would be best if both sides suffered heavy injuries. That would be the best ending. Qin Wentian furrowed his brows. He wasn't sure why the Mystic Moon sect wanted to help, but it was clear that he didn't want the Mystic Moon sect to be in danger. Ouyang Quangxing, help the Mystic Moon sect and I'll owe you a favor. How about it? Qin Wentian continued staring at the Swallow Swordsman, while Ouyang Quangxing stood not far behind him. He had his back to Ouyang Quangxing when he spoke. The Mystic Moon sect was being surrounded. He had to do something. Ouyang Quangxing didn't expect that Qin Wentian would speak to him. His eyes flickered with contemplation before he smiled. Fine, there's no need for you to owe me a favor. Just treat it as me, Ouyang, making a friend. After speaking, Ouyang Quangxing stepped out. Abruptly, terrifying flames erupted from his body as a terrifying heat gushed forth from him. Ouyang Quangxing's entire body was bathed in terrifying flames, and with a single punch, the person in front of him was instantly engulfed in flames. With a deafening boom, the person in front of him was instantly crushed to death. Ouyang Quangxing is truly arrogant. How strong. However, this fellow is truly someone who does as he pleases. He didn't even know Qin Wentian, yet he acted just because of a single sentence from Qin Wentian. This undoubtedly offended the Beast King Hall and the Sky Demon sect. The hearts of many mused. However, they had also heard of Ouyang Quangxing's personality. When had this fellow ever cared about the opinions of others? If he cared about the opinions of others, he wouldn't have chosen to cultivate when the other members of the same generation had already reached the arterial circulation realm. One could only imagine how much disdain Ouyang Quangxing had endured back then. However, he didn't care, and persisted until he was 16 years old, when he could condense an astral soul from the 4th heavenly layer, shocking the world with a single feat. This kind of indifference, in and of itself, was a kind of arrogance. It was enough for him to know what he wanted to do. The opinions of others had nothing to do with him. Earlier, Ouyang Quangxing had personally witnessed Qin Wentian's strength. He had single-handedly fought against Mu Baifei and the other 2 Swallow Swordsmen. With such combat prowess, he was still willing to split the stellar fruits equally with those from the stellar pavilion. From this, one could see that there was no need to doubt Qin Wentian's character. He wasn't a selfish person, and more importantly, he had personally witnessed Qin Wentian subduing the Yellow Springs Monument. The legend of the Yellow Springs Monument and the Yellow Springs Ancient Path had already circulated around the 9 continents for thousands of years. When one encountered the Yellow Springs on the road, repent and be saved. However, there had never been anyone who could subdue the Yellow Springs Monument. Qin Wentian was the first to do so. Hence, when Qin Wentian spoke, Ouyang Quangxing only took a moment to consider before agreeing. This was a friend they could befriend. Many thanks. Qin Wentian could feel Ouyang Quangxing's forthrightness. Naturally, he was willing to befriend such a person. As such, the various transcendent powers had all participated in this battle. Not only that, it was all because of that unknown character Qin Wentian. Sadly, those from the Stellar Pavilion didn't even have the qualifications to participate in this battle. Not only that, Jiang Ting and Ouyang Quangxing had yet to arrive. Finally, Only Wang Xiao from the Wang clan of the War Continent remained. Many in the crowd glanced at Wang Xiao, only to see him calmly standing there, watching everything unfold in front of him. Nobody could tell what he was thinking, but according to what the crowd knew, Wang Xiao from the Wang clan was definitely one of the most terrifying characters here. The pressure he could bring forth was definitely no less than Ouyang Guangxing's. Now, he just didn't know if Wang Xiao would participate in this storm. But no matter what, the current Qin Wentian could finally focus on dealing with Mu Baifei and the other two swallow swordsmen. Chapter 188. Qin Wentian plucked out his ancient halberd. The stellar fruits were able to replenish astral energy at a rapid rate. Qin Wentian had already sensed this point. However, Mu Baifei and the rest didn't have any stellar fruits. After defeating Qian Mingyu and the other four from the Green Cloud Pavilion, they had to fight against Qin Wentian. Especially that combination of swordplay earlier, they had all expended a tremendous amount of astral energy. As they stared at Qin Wentian slowly walking towards them, traces of wariness could be seen in their eyes. Mu Baifei brandished his longsword once again. The pride of a swallow swordsman was not something that could be crushed. The other two beside him also brandished their swords. The sword intent exuded from them was extremely sharp, as the glow of their astral souls shone downwards, causing the power of their swords to increase by several notches. Busy. Qin Wentian's silhouette transformed into a shadow as he violently slashed out with his ancient halberd towards Mu Baifei. The mountain splitter stance was ferocious, powerful, and capable of splitting a mountain apart. Not only that, this strike was also infused with sword-type divine yuan energy. As the leader of the three swallow swordsmen, Mu Baifei's combat prowess was also the strongest. He definitely lived up to his reputation. His longsword twirled in the air, as resplendent beams of light danced in the air, emitting a desolate killing intent. Boom! The powerful force of the collision forced Mu Baifei to retreat. However, the attacks of the other two instantly arrived. Their swords were as fast as lightning. Qin Wentian rotated his feet as he simultaneously blasted out with his falling mountain palms. His falling mountain palms were as heavy as a mountain, containing boundless might, blocking the sword light from the left. At the same time, as the sword light from the right pierced towards him, he abruptly slammed his ancient halberd downwards. The ancient halberd transformed into a terrifying beam of light as it shot towards Mu Baifei. Puchi! Qin Wentian opened his mouth as he spat out a beam of sword light towards the right, causing his opponent's attack to falter momentarily. Qin Wentian's arterial pathways began to churn as a roaring sound echoed out. Kill! With a furious roar, Qin Wentian's arm seemed to contain an incomparably terrifying power. He blasted out a terrifying Kuji seal, which was emitting a terrifying blood-red light. It transformed into a blood-red palm that was filled with destructive power. With a loud bang, his opponent's sword flew out of his hand. Qin Wentian's speed was incomparably ferocious. He had long prepared for this attack. Executing the Garuda movement technique, he closed in on his opponent. The countenance of his opponent grew incredibly unsightly to behold, as he hurriedly stabbed out with his finger, the tip of his finger imbued with a powerful sword intent. But in close combat, how tyrannical was Qin Wentian? His demonic eyes stared at his opponent, causing his opponent to feel as though he was about to sink into an unreal dream. After that, a blood-colored palm smashed over, destroying his attack. Qin Wentian stabbed out with his finger, and a sharp divine yuan sword imbued with blood-colored runes pierced into his opponent's head. Everything happened in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. However, Mu Baifei and the other opponent's sword slashed over, causing Qin Wentian to feel an intense sense of danger. In an instant, Qin Wentian adjusted his attack, and a terrifying amount of divine energy erupted forth, transforming into a resplendent sword that shot towards Mu Baifei. The threat Mu Baifei posed to him was even greater than before, but at the same time, the other opponent's sword arrived. Qin Wentian's left palm trembled as he slapped out horizontally. A beam of blood-red light flashed, and a bloodstain appeared on Qin Wentian's palm. His opponent's sword was simply too sharp. Against such an opponent, the slightest bit of carelessness would result in death. Qin Wentian hurriedly retreated. Mu Baifei and the other opponent knew that they had missed the best opportunity to kill Qin Wentian. Glancing at the corpse of their comrade, their gazes grew heavy as they stared at Qin Wentian, their killing intent growing increasingly intense. Qin Wentian turned his head and glanced at Mo Qingcheng. Shiki had completely gone berserk, transforming into a half-human, half-demonic beast as he frenziedly suppressed Mo Qingcheng. Even with his status, he was actually unable to suppress Mo Qingcheng, causing him to feel extremely embarrassed. However, there was no need to worry about the mystic Moon Hall. Ouyang Guangxing's strength was indeed powerful, and in addition to the fact that the members of the Mystic Moon Hall were also extremely powerful, they weren't at a disadvantage against those from the Sky Demon Sect and Beast King Hall. As for those who weren't from the Transcendent Powers, they were more than happy to watch the commotion. They were already in a weaker position, and the frenzied battle of these Transcendent Powers was extremely beneficial to them. What a cold wind! At this moment, some of the spectators shivered as they felt the cold wind gusting against their bodies. Not only that, the intensity of the wind grew increasingly intense. Everyone frowned slightly. After that, they looked in a certain direction. It was the only crack in the mountain wall. The suction force from the crack that could accommodate several people was getting stronger and stronger. It was actually spreading outwards, and there was already a momentum of sand and gravel flying around. What's going on? The spectators turned their gazes over, and to their astonishment, they discovered that a terrifying gale of wind gusted over, gushing towards that crack. It was as though the crack in the mountain rampart wanted to devour everything. In just a short instant, the robes of the spectators fluttered in the wind. They felt as though they were about to be sucked into the crack, and this feeling grew increasingly intense. Everyone stopped fighting. Qin Wentian was forced to take a step back by the gale of wind. Qin Wentian steadied himself, but he couldn't even open his eyes. This wind was extremely bizarre. Under the influence of this gale of wind, there were people moving unceasingly. One of them dashed towards Qin Wentian, causing Qin Wentian to take a step back. Abruptly, that person turned around as a gigantic axe appeared in his hand, slashing down towards Qin Wentian. If Qin Wentian was struck by that attack, his body would definitely be split into two. Qin Wentian instantly broke out in cold sweat. Right now, under the influence of this gale, it was basically impossible for him to move. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to evade the attack easily, and it was even more difficult for him to summon his strength to resist. Not only that, the power of that attack was extremely terrifying. This seemingly unremarkable figure was definitely an extremely tyrannical one. Clearly, this person was after the star fruits in his possession. Boom! Qin Wentian abruptly relaxed his body, not resisting the gale of wind. His body directly drifted towards the direction of the mountain rampart, and as the gigantic axe slashed out, a terrifying axe light flashed. A piercing sound rang out as the robes on his chest were torn apart, as fresh blood spurted out. A long bloody wound appeared on his chest. With a thunderous boom, Qin Wentian's body was slammed into the mountain rampart, as he felt intense pain all over his body. That gale of wind was simply too terrifying. Wentian. Mo Qingqing's voice drifted over. She had personally witnessed that terrifying axe slash earlier, and was currently struggling to move towards Qin Wentian's location. I'm fine. Qin Wentian turned his head and smiled at Mo Qingqing. He could feel the power of his bloodline limit surging within him, as the bloody wound on his chest slowly healed. This caused Qin Wentian's heart to tremble slightly, after which the blood-colored runes in his body frenziedly surged towards the wound, and as expected, the speed at which the wound healed grew even faster. This caused Qin Wentian to once again feel how powerful his bloodline limit was. Over here. Mo Qingqing stretched out her hand towards Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian leaned against the mountain rampart as he moved towards her. Pulling her dainty hand in his, he stated, Qingqing, I'm afraid no one would be able to withstand this demonic wind. We can only go with the flow and enter that passageway. Mo Qingqing lightly nodded her head, as the two of them held each other's hands tightly. Let's go. Qin Wentian didn't retrieve his ancient halberd, nor did he think about finding the expert who slashed at him earlier. At this moment, the most important thing was his safety. He cast a glance at the people within the windstorm, and noticed that there were quite a few who had launched sneak attacks. The people here were all extremely ruthless, and they wouldn't miss out on any opportunities. The two of them completely relaxed. Momentarily, that terrifying demonic wind instantly swept them into the crack in the mountain rampart, and after which, they felt as though they were soaring through the clouds. A thunderous sound rang out, and Qin Wentian knew that he had slammed into the stone rampart beside him. He only felt his mind going blank, and that terrifying demonic wind was so strong that he couldn't even open his eyes. Astral energy circulated around his body, and the blood vessels in his body churned, protecting him. At the same time, Qin Wentian pulled Mo Qingqing into his embrace, and hugged her tightly as they soared through the raging wind. Mo Qingqing's internal organs were trembling violently, but when she suddenly felt that warm embrace, she felt a sweetness in her heart. She also hugged Qin Wentian tightly. Their bodies unceasingly slammed into the mountain rampart, and after a long time, Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing finally slammed heavily onto the ground. They rolled a few times on the ground, but their bodies were still tightly stuck together. Opening his eyes, Qin Wentian stared at the pair of glowing eyes. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. They were still alive. Mo Qingqing also had a sweet smile on her face. The two of them sat up with great difficulty, feeling as though their bodies were about to fall apart. Surveying their surroundings, they discovered that they were currently in the midst of a violent tempest. However, very quickly, the eyes of the two of them froze as they stared ahead. The reason why they could still feel such a strong storm was because there was a cold wind that was as sharp as a blade blowing in front of them. In front of them, there was a terrifying storm. However, as their gazes penetrated through the tempest, they saw a magnificent scene. Numerous towering stone pillars seemed to be connected to the constellations in the sky, and astral light cascaded downwards, cascading into the astral pool that was enveloped by the stone pillars. That place was the celestial pool. As long as they passed through the tempest, they would be able to bathe in the celestial pool. At this moment, the crowd had already been blown over by the demonic tempest. When they climbed up, they similarly discovered the celestial pool on the other side of the tempest, only to see several people madly sprinting in that direction, stepping into the tempest. However, very quickly they slowed their steps, as though they could feel how terrifying the tempest was. Step by step, more and more people stepped into the tempest. Finally, the person in the lead had already traversed a third of the tempest, yet his astral energy seemed to have been completely depleted, following which, a rain of blood rained down, and the crowd could clearly see his body being torn apart by the tempest. Such a scene caused the hearts of many to pound, especially those who had already entered the tempest. Their hearts trembled, but they could only grit their teeth and continue forward. Scenes of blood and gore appeared, causing the hearts of the crowd to tremble unceasingly. Those who had entered the tempest had all died. Even the person who managed to traverse the furthest distance didn't even manage to traverse half of the tempest. Stellar fruits. The gazes of many abruptly shifted in the direction of Qin Wentian and Mu Baifei. Other than Ouyang Quangsheng, only Qin Wentian and Mu Baifei possessed stellar fruits. Without sufficient astral energy to protect one's body, it was basically impossible to traverse that distance. The existence of the stellar fruits was precisely for the sake of passing through the tempest, allowing one to reach the celestial pool, only to see the silhouettes of the crowd rapidly moving about, blocking the path of Qin Wentian, Mo Qingqing, and Mu Baifei, not allowing them to enter the tempest. In fact, even Ouyang Quangsheng was blocked by the crowd. With regards to the stellar fruits, they had no choice but to take the risk. What made the hearts of the crowd tremble was that the first person to make a move was none other than Wang Xiao from the War Continent, and his target was none other than the swallow swordsman Mu Baifei. Qin Wentian glanced at the other swallow swordsman standing beside Mu Baifei. Of the three swallow swordsmen, he was the only one remaining. When he saw the icy glare of Qin Wentian, a trace of fear finally appeared in his eyes. Chapter 189. At this moment, no one dared to casually step into the tempest. They were very clear that the moment they stepped in, they would have to expend their astral energy to resist the terrifying tempest. And by the time they discovered that their astral energy was insufficient to support them, it would already be too late for them to retreat. This was also the reason why the first batch of people had died in the tempest. Now, even if they wanted to probe further, they wouldn't enter the tempest. They would only casually take a few steps to sense the surroundings. However, the majority of them were thinking about the stellar fruits. Only by doing so would they be able to reach the other shore. However, at this moment, the swallow swordsman who was with Mu Baifei wasn't thinking about the stellar fruits. Rather, he was thinking about his own life. Seeing Qin Wentian walking towards him, the astral wind buffeted his face. He was truly afraid. The silhouette of the youth walking towards him gave him an unprecedented sense of pressure. Not long ago, the three of them had joined forces to deal with Qin Wentian. Yet they were still unable to do anything to him. But now he was the only one left. Bzzz. Qin Wentian released his movement technique, instantly appearing in front of the swallow swordsman. The divine energy in his arterial pathways seethed, and the blood-colored Kuji imprint emanated an aura of annihilation. The swallow swordsman's countenance paled as he raised his sword to defend. His sword flashed brilliantly, but in the face of the blood-colored palm imprint, it seemed to have lost its luster. With a thunderous boom, the swallow swordsman staggered backwards in the sand, after which, a gust of cold wind brushed past him, as he felt his entire body turn cold. After which, a resplendent beam of sword light flashed past, piercing through his throat. Tossing aside the divine weapon in his hand, he clutched his throat with both hands. Very quickly, his throat was dyed red with fresh blood. Despair could be seen in his eyes as he knelt weakly on the ground, his blood dripping onto the sand. Filled with fear and despair, the body of the arrogant swallow swordsman softly slumped to the ground. This caused the gazes of the spectators to be filled with trepidation as they stared at Qin Wentian. Although he had the stellar fruits on him, it wouldn't be easy to obtain them. As Wang Xiao approached Mu Baifei, he immediately unleashed a terrifying barrage of attacks. His entire body was like a weapon, indestructible and indestructible. Numerous astral flying daggers manifested, transforming into a silvery glow as they shot towards Mu Baifei. Mu Baifei used his sword to defend, yet Wang Xiao's fists were as tough as steel. Occasionally, terrifying divine weapons would be unleashed, and in the midst of the battle, a golden hoop would suddenly appear, breaking apart everything in its path. At other times, there would be chains that were as sharp as blades, and the pressure was so great that Mu Baifei was forced to retreat continuously. Boom! Wang Xiao stepped right in front of Mu Baifei, both of his hands clad in silver armor. After deflecting Mu Baifei's sword, he slammed his fist into Mu Baifei's body, causing Mu Baifei to be sent flying backwards as he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. "I'll give you the star fruits." Mu Baifei's face was pale as he spoke to Wang Xiao. Only then did Wang Xiao stop, as he walked towards Mu Baifei. His countenance was cold and emotionless, yet it gave off a domineering feeling, as though he was a divine weapon, cold and sharp at the same time. Stretching his hands out, Wang Xiao placed the stellar fruits in Wang Zhao's hands, only to see Wang Xiao frowning as he coldly stated, "Take them all out." Mu Baifei's countenance stiffened. One could only imagine the humiliation he felt at this moment. However, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and hand over all the stellar fruits to Wang Xiao. Only then did Wang Xiao turn around, as a few others walked towards him. Wang Xiao distributed the stellar fruits to them. Evidently, these people were brought here by him. Not only did he want to bathe in the celestial lake, he also wanted to bring his people along with him. If Qin Wentian were to glance over, he would discover that the person who used the giant axe to ambush him had also accepted Wang Zhao's distribution of the stellar fruits. We still need to make some more preparations. Wang Xiao furrowed his brows as he stared at Qin Wentian and Ouyang Quangxing. Ouyang Quangxing and those from the Mystic Moon sect were together. Not long ago, Ouyang Quangxing had helped the Mystic Moon sect, and now they had formed an alliance to resist the pressure from the Sky Demon sect and Beast King Hall. As for Qin Wentian, he had just killed a swallow swordsman, and there were many eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. However, none of them dared to make a move against him. Because so many people had fallen, there were only 40+ people left in this space. Wang Xiao gazed at the surroundings, as he pointed his finger in the direction of the mountain rampart. Earlier, those who had entered the celestial lake were dragged here by the hurricane. Those who don't wish to die, go over there. Wang Xiao pointed at the mountain rampart, his voice as cold as ever. His indifferent countenance made it seem as though he was merely speaking a normal sentence. The countenances of many stiffened, as expressions of astonishment appeared on their faces. After which, they narrowed their eyes as they discovered something interesting. Coincidentally, there were 6 people standing beside Wang Xiao. Including Wang Xiao himself, there were a total of 7 people. And there were only 7 slots for the celestial lake, and only 7 people had the qualifications to bathe in the celestial lake. The Wang clan of the War Continent had only sent 7 people, and the meaning behind this was obvious. Especially after hearing Wang Zhao's words, the crowd could feel that he was truly arrogant. Wang Xiao wasn't just an ordinary kind of arrogance. His ambitions were extremely great, and he wanted the people he brought from the War Continent to monopolize the celestial lake. However, since they had already reached this step, although many of them knew that they didn't have much hope of obtaining the celestial lake, they still held on to a glimmer of hope. None of them were willing to give up. In fact, there was even one person who believed that his astral energy was extremely abundant. He stepped into the tempest in front of him, wanting to make another attempt. Clean up the battlefield. Wang Xiao icily spoke. Momentarily, the people around him gathered together in a row as an intense killing intent gushed forth. At this moment, all of them seemed to have transformed into ice-cold divine weapons, exuding a cold-blooded aura. They slowly walked towards the group of experts, causing their countenances to freeze. After which, they only saw the glow of the various divine weapons radiating from them. Kill! A howl of rage rang out as killing intent shook the heavens. The divine weapons of those from the Wang clan all shone with a terrifying killing intent as they slashed out in anger. Just like what Wang Xiao had said, they started to clean up the battlefield. The Wang clan, who had always maintained a low profile, finally revealed their terrifying countenance after staring at the celestial lake, sweeping away everything in their path. Their killing intent was akin to a raging tempest, and very quickly, for people had already died under the divine weapons of the Wang clan. Qian Mingyu and her companions stood there, and upon seeing the Wang clan slowly walking over, her countenance paled. At this moment, Qian Mingyu's emotions were extremely complicated. Usually, she was extremely conceited, but today at the final juncture, she didn't even have the qualifications to fight. She was about to be eliminated. This was cruel, but it was also the truth. She had no choice but to face it. She was very clear what the confrontation today meant. It meant that when she clashed against the other transcendent powers of the 9 continents, she was already suppressed. Not only that, these transcendent powers were merely a portion of the 9 continents. Even so, she had already lost her luster. In the future, how would she be able to fight for a place in the grand stage of the 9 continents? If this situation persisted in the future, she would definitely be eliminated by the passing of time, becoming mediocre. In the countless years of the 9 continents, which one of those dazzling characters didn't dazzle the eyes of those of the same generation? Step by step, they rose to prominence. Sighing in her heart, Qian Mingyu walked towards the direction of the mountain rampart, not even turning her head back. Today, she was first defeated by Mu Baifei. After that, Qin Wentian single-handedly fought against Mu Baifei and the other 2 swallow swordsmen. And after that, Wang Xiao used his absolute dominance to suppress Mu Baifei. One could very well imagine how pitiful her defeat was. Seeing Qian Mingyu leading those from the Green Cloud Pavilion away, the countenances of many in the crowd dimmed, and they all gave up on the battle. The main reason for participating in the refinement grounds was for the sake of the celestial pool. The secondary reason was for tempering oneself, but preserving one's life was always the most important. Although it was regretful that they didn't have the chance to bathe in the celestial pool, they had still benefited greatly from this experience. In the future, they would definitely put in more effort in their cultivation, and strive to compete against these dazzling characters. Wang Xiao, Ouyang Quangxing, Mu Baifei, and that unknown fellow. These people were all remembered by the crowd. In the future, they would leave behind a thick mark in the history of Grand Xia. Although the person who stepped into the tempest was unwilling, he still felt that he wouldn't be able to pass it. Hence, he chose to retreat instead. However, just as he was about to exit the tempest, his astral energy was completely depleted, and his body was shredded into pieces. He died within the tempest, causing many in the crowd to sigh with regret. Without the stellar fruits, none of those present had the confidence to pass the tempest. Only to see Wang Xiao sweeping his gaze over the crowd. There weren't many people left, only the Sky Demon Sect, Beast King Hall, Mystic Moon Hall, and Ouyang Quangxing remained standing. Ouyang Quangxing's combat prowess was indeed impressive. He single-handedly fought against the Berserk Shiki, as well as the frenzied Yao Sheng, yet he didn't lose out in the slightest. No matter how violent the tempest was, he remained unmoved, and his attacks were as tyrannical as ever. Upon seeing their battle, the spectators from afar realized that although Ouyang Quangxing's personality was frivolous and did whatever he wanted, regardless of whether it was in terms of offense or defense, he was extremely stable. From this, one could see that his cultivation path was extremely stable, and his innate techniques were extremely solid as well. Other than those who were still fighting, the only ones remaining were Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng. Even Mu Baifei had already given up on this battle. Wang Xiao walked towards Qin Wentian, as the people behind him followed behind him. It was as though the 7 from the Wang clan of the War Continent were really here to clean up the battlefield. Cleaning them up one by one, they wanted to obtain the final 7 spots. Wang Xiao waved his hands, causing the people behind him to halt their actions. He walked towards Qin Wentian alone. He had always thought that only Ouyang Quangxing had the qualifications to be his opponent in this trial. But now that he saw Qin Wentian, he wanted to see how strong this young man, who could contend against Mu Baifei and the other 2 swallow swordsmen, was. I'll deal with her. One of the people behind Wang Xiao glanced at Mo Qingcheng. They understood Wang Xiao's intentions, but they couldn't allow Mo Qingcheng to affect the battle between Wang Xiao and Qin Wentian. After speaking, that person walked towards Mo Qingcheng. This person was none other than the person who had launched a sneak attack on Qin Wentian earlier. Wang Xiao's footsteps quickened, as though he was running. Yellow sand billowed as a terrifying killing intent gushed forth. Qin Wentian's footsteps spun as he similarly sprinted towards Wang Xiao. Both of them radiated a domineering battle intent, but the only difference was their demeanor. Wang Xiao's aura was cold and sharp, akin to a divine weapon, while Qin Wentian's aura was that of a demon king, unexcelled in the world. Chapter 190. Wang Xiao and Qin Wentian finally clashed against each other. Both of them simultaneously lifted their palms and attacked. From Wang Xiao's body, a fearsome sharpness gushed forth. His arms seemed to contain the sharpness of a divine weapon. Qin Wentian blasted out with the falling mountain palms. The terrifying might of his palm was akin to the weight of a mountain peak as it smashed downwards, containing boundless might. A thunderous boom rang out as the falling mountain palms were shattered. Wang Xiao's palms and Qin Wentian's palms collided together as an ice-cold sharpness gushed into Qin Wentian's body. Qin Wentian stared at Wang Xiao with extreme coldness in his eyes. A dreamlike intent gushed forth from Qin Wentian's eyes, causing Wang Xiao's pupils to shrink. After which, his eyes turned silvery white, exuding an ice-cold tyrannical aura. Puchi. Qin Wentian opened his mouth and spat out a beam of sword light. Wang Xiao's silhouette spun as a resplendent silver-colored flying dagger shot towards Qin Wentian with lightning speed. The silver-colored lightning radiated from his palms, and in an instant, a boundless amount of silvery light danced about in the air. Qin Wentian's countenance froze. After which, he frenziedly lifted his palms to attack. The dragon's subduing fists howled in rage as he continuously attacked, defending against the incoming silver-colored flying dagger. Izzy. A resplendent ring of light accompanied the silver-colored flying dagger as it flew out, exuding an incomparably dazzling radiance. That whistling sound caused Qin Wentian to feel an intense sense of danger. That was a golden hoop, and its might was extremely terrifying. Kuji imprint. Qin Wentian's palms blasted out with earth-shattering might. With a deafening boom, the golden hoop was jolted back, flying back into Wang Zhao's hands. At the same time, a silver-colored chain coiled over, wanting to lock Qin Wentian within. The golden hoop howled in rage as it blasted out once more, exuding a terrifying might. The Wang clan of the War Continent was an aristocratic clan of weaponsmiths. To them, all sorts of powerful divine weapons were no different from ordinary weapons. A blood-red light radiated from Qin Wentian's palm as demonic qi surged forth. He unleashed a palm imprint, firmly locking onto the chains. At the same time, his other palm once again blasted the golden hoop back. At this moment, Qin Wentian seemed to be filled with endless power. A resplendent white light rose from Wang Zhao's body, as though the power of his bloodline was boiling. An even sharper aura enveloped his body, and a terrifying white light flashed in his eyes. His entire body seemed to be clad in armor, and his arms were covered in silver armor, cold and indestructible. Boom! Stepping out, Wang Zhao's entire body seemed to have transformed into a divine weapon. His eyes were fixed on Qin Wentian, and the diamond ring in his hand blasted out. At the same time, his fist smashed towards Qin Wentian. There seemed to be terrifying sharp edges on his fist. Wang Zhao of the War Continent, his entire body is like a divine weapon. How terrifying! The spectators all felt their hearts trembling in fear. Among the crowd, Wang Zhao, Ouyang Guangxing and Qin Wentian were the strongest three. Wang Zhao had used all sorts of methods, yet he couldn't do anything to Qin Wentian. And now he was finally enraged. Qin Wentian's palms were still locked onto his opponent's chains. Seeing his opponent dragging the chains closer to him, boundless sword light erupted forth from his body as the sword-type divine energy within his body unhesitatingly gushed forth. The sharpness contained within his body was enough to kill everything in its path. Boom! Qin Wentian took a step forward, releasing the chains. His palms blasted out as numerous divine weapons transformed into a terrifying vortex, as thousands upon thousands of swords whistled through the air. Die! With a howl of rage, Qin Wentian advanced with indomitable will. The blood-colored light infused into his swords, and his swords contained the intent of the sword Monarch. The attacks of the two collided, and the dazzling light from the collision caused the spectators to be unable to open their eyes. After which, the spectators saw both Qin Wentian and Wang Zhao retreating. Especially Wang Zhao. His indestructible body, which was akin to a divine weapon, actually had traces of fresh blood dripping from it. This scene caused Wang Zhao to be stunned. After which, he inclined his head and released an even colder aura. Both of them took out a stellar fruit and swallowed it. Both of them stared at each other, knowing that they had met their strongest opponents. Qin Wentian glanced to the side. Mo Qingqing was currently fighting against the person wielding the gigantic axe. Yet she was actually being completely suppressed. Her opponent was also a cultivator at the Yuanfu realm, and had 3 divine weapon astral souls. At this moment he lifted his gigantic axe and slashed downwards in a frenzy. Mo Qingqing's countenance paled, and she did her best to defend, yet the impact of the attack still caused her to cough out blood. Her breathing was ragged, yet she didn't make a sound. She didn't want to disturb Qin Wentian's battle. Bzzz. Qin Wentian lifted his feet and sprinted in that direction, only to see the members of the Wang clan blocking his path. At the same time, he felt a sense of danger from behind him. Wang Zhao was advancing towards him, as a resplendent silvery light appeared in front of him. Die! Wang Zhao coldly snorted, as a silvery orb appeared in his palm. As the orb erupted forth, it released countless silvery fragments, each of which contained a fearsome attack power. These fragments blotted out the skies as they swept towards Qin Wentian, akin to bolts of lightning. A blood-colored light flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes as the power of his bloodline erupted forth. In front of him, a stone tablet appeared. This was none other than the Yellow Springs Monument. He had just obtained the Yellow Springs Monument, and didn't know how to control it. But now he had no choice but to use it. Stomping his foot on the ground, Qin Wentian's demonic qi towered up to the skies as a blood-colored light danced in the air. Resplendent divine energy erupted forth, blocking the incoming silvery fragments. At the same time, he communicated with the Yellow Springs Monument, infusing it with the power of his bloodline. He could sense that the Yellow Springs monument contained a terrifying amount of blood qi that could be activated by the power of his bloodline. Boom! An abrupt sound rang out, causing the hearts of the spectators to pound as the blood qi in their bodies churned wildly. The Yellow Springs monument floated above Qin Wentian's head. As the blood-colored light unceasingly flowed into Qin Wentian's body, the Yellow Springs monument stared at Wang Xiao, causing Wang Xiao to feel a chill in his heart. Bzzz. The Yellow Springs monument flew towards Wang Xiao. Boom. Wang Xiao's heart pounded once more, as he lost control of his bloodline. He felt as though his blood vessels were about to explode. He couldn't be bothered with attacking, and could only retreat with increasing speed as his countenance turned ashen. As the Yellow Springs monument flew back, Qin Wentian turned and sprinted towards Mo Qingcheng. Boom boom. Those from the Wang clan all felt their hearts pounding. Their countenances were extremely unsightly to behold as they hurriedly evaded. Even Mo Qingcheng was affected. As for Mo Qingcheng, the countenance of the person opposite her was extremely heavy. He slashed out with his great axe before explosively retreating. Qingcheng, follow me. Qin Wentian spoke, as he sped towards the person wielding the great axe. Mo Qingcheng followed behind Qin Wentian, maintaining a certain distance between them. The person wielding the great axe madly fled, only to see Qin Wentian unceasingly striking out with the Yellow Springs monument. Boom. His heart pounded as his countenance turned red. Boom. His heart pounded even faster, as his veins popped out. Roar. That person roared in rage. Astral energy enveloped his entire body. Yet Qin Wentian continued to pursue him relentlessly. The Yellow Springs monument relentlessly chased after him, emitting a rhythmic yet terrifying sound. Dong. Another trembling sound rang out. That person finally couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, his face deathly pale. Dong dong dong. He stopped in his tracks, his heart beating rapidly. He turned around, only to see the Yellow Springs stone tablet directly imprint on his body. Arg! A miserable scream rang out. The blood qi in his body exploded as his heart shattered. Blood splattered everywhere, landing on the Yellow Springs stone steel. However, the blood was directly absorbed by the Yellow Springs stone steel. His body softly slumped to the ground, dying an extremely miserable death. The crowd stopped fighting at the same time. They all looked at the stone tablet floating above Qin Wentian's head in horror. Their expressions were particularly interesting. The stone steel of the underworld, the rumored stone steel of the path of celestial pool trial. How did it fall into the hands of Qin Wentian? This fellow can actually control the Yellow Springs stone steel to attack. Ouyang Guangxing knew this, but he was still shocked in his heart. Subduing the Yellow Springs stone steel was one thing, but if Qin Wentian could really control it, it must have been forced out by that fellow, Wang Xiao. Wang Xiao was from the Wang clan of the War Continent, and he had many divine weapons on him. Not only that, they were all extremely powerful, forcing Qin Wentian to use the Yellow Springs stone steel. However, when the Yellow Springs stone steel was in the hands of Qin Wentian, it didn't seem to be as powerful as before. This was probably because Qin Wentian's cultivation base was too weak. Here. Mo Qingcheng walked to the side of Qin Wentian, and passed him a medicinal pill. She had also consumed one earlier. When Qin Wentian stared at Mo Qingcheng, the coldness in his eyes softened. That smile of his caused a strange feeling to appear in the hearts of the spectators. This fellow, who exuded a blood-colored demonic qi and the aura of a sovereign, actually had such a gentle side to him when facing Mo Qingcheng. After swallowing the medicinal pill, Qin Wentian and Mo Qingcheng each consumed a stellar fruit. The two of them exchanged glances and smiled, feeling that it wasn't easy for them to reach this step. Qin Wentian cast a glance at Ouyang Guangxing's side, only to see that only 3 of the experts from the Mystic Moon Hall remained. From this, one could see how intense the battle earlier had been. Naturally, the Beast King Hall and Sky Demon sect had also suffered heavy losses as well. At this moment, those from the Beast King Hall and Sky Demon sect had actually gathered together with Wang Xiao and the rest. Evidently, after seeing the Yellow Springs stone steel, they knew how strong the threat Qin Wentian posed was. Ouyang, do we have enough stellar fruits? Qin Wentian stared at Ouyang Guangxing. I have 4 people with me. The amount of stellar fruits we have should be sufficient for us to cross over. Ouyang Guangxing replied. Right now, their goal was to cross the tempest to the other side. After crossing over, the stellar fruits would no longer be of any use to them. Naturally, they wouldn't be stingy with their allies. Okay, let's enter. Qin Wentian stated. After Ouyang Guangxing distributed the stellar fruits, the 6 of them stepped into the tempest, causing the gazes of the crowd to freeze. The 6 of them would occupy 6 slots. Not only that, other than the stellar fruits they had, the rest were all in Wang Xiao's hands. At this moment, the gazes of many in the crowd were fixated on Wang Xiao. Even those from the Beast King Hall and Celestial Palace were the same. There was only 1 slot left, and their hopes rested on Wang Xiao. Wang Xiao's countenance sank, as the coldness in his eyes grew even colder. Clutching the orb in his hands, a sharp aura emanated from him, giving off an intense sense of danger. Nobody dared to act recklessly. Initially, Wang Xiao had planned to bring the 7 from the Wang clan along to bathe in the celestial pool. But now, that was no longer possible. As he stared at Qin Wentian, the coldness in his eyes intensified. Qian Mingyu leaned against the mountain wall as she stared at Qin Wentian and the rest, an indescribable feeling in her heart. Qin Wentian had always taken the initiative to form an alliance with them. If it wasn't for the fact that there were conflicts due to the stellar fruits, Qin Wentian would definitely have given her the last slot. Chapter 191. After Qin Wentian and the rest stepped into the tempest, they could instantly feel the sharpness of the cold wind. They didn't hesitate to release their astral energy to protect themselves. Stellar martial cultivators usually had weaker bodies, but demonic beasts were an exception. It was impossible for them to withstand the tempest with their bodies alone. Maybe Qin Wentian's physique would be able to withstand it, but if he wanted to pass through it without the aid of astral energy, that was undoubtedly a fool's dream. Amidst the tempest, Qin Wentian held onto Mo Qingqing's hand. The 2 of them walked side by side, their bodies shrouded in astral light. Not only that, as the tempest raged on, the astral energy in their bodies was being depleted at an extremely fast rate. This was also the reason why those people died earlier. Luckily, Qin Wentian and the others had already prepared the stellar fruits. Qingqing consumed the stellar fruits in advance. Qin Wentian called out to Mo Qingqing, who was beside him. Mo Qingqing nodded her head, and after walking a third of the way, she consumed a stellar fruit. This way, her body would always be filled with astral energy. An hour later, Qin Wentian and the rest finally passed through the tempest. They couldn't help but draw in a deep breath, feeling incomparably relaxed. How beautiful! Mo Qingqing's beautiful eyes stared ahead. There were 7 celestial pools, each of them surrounded by towering astral stone pillars. Each and every one of the astral stone pillars seemed to be connected to the constellations in the sky. Resplendent astral light cascaded downwards like a waterfall, a magnificent sight to behold. This scene was like a dream, too beautiful. Celestial Lake. Those from the Mystic Moon Hall and Ouyang Guangxing had also arrived. They exchanged glances as smiles could be seen flickering in their eyes. After all, this trip to the celestial pools wasn't an easy one. Qin Wentian pulled Mo Qingqing along as they walked towards the 3 from the Mystic Moon Hall. Glancing at the veiled maiden, he smiled. Thank you all. When Qin Wentian looked at him, he felt that the pair of eyes that were exposed were very bright and clear, as if there was a special emotion in them. This made Qin Wentian feel a little surprised. The pair of eyes seemed to contain feelings. I'm fine. The woman lowered her head and said softly. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head as he turned his gaze onto Ouyang Guangxing. Just as he was about to speak, Ouyang Guangxing laughed. Ouyang Guangxing of the Azure Continent. As a friend, we should at least get to know each other again. Qin Wentian from Chu, under the jurisdiction of the 9 Mystical Palace. Qin Wentian smiled as he nodded his head to Ouyang Guangxing. His countenance was calm, no longer exuding the tyrannical demonic aura from earlier. The people of Chu under the jurisdiction of the 9 Mystical Palace are truly surprising. Ouyang Guangxing had never heard of Chu before, But he knew of the 9 mystical palace. Who would have thought that a small country under the jurisdiction of the 9 mystical palace would have such a character? Okay, let's get down to business first. Since we're already at the Celestial Lakes, we should at least enjoy the scenery of the legendary Celestial Lakes. Ouyang Guangxing smiled as he stared ahead. The others nodded their heads as they advanced forward. Within the 7 celestial lakes, there was a brilliant glow of astral light circulating within. I'll enter first. Ouyang Guangxing stepped into one of the celestial lakes, and at the instant he did so, the astral stone pillar enveloping the celestial lake began to glow with a resplendent light as it actually began to move. After which, a terrifying surge of astral energy enveloped the entire celestial lake. Ouyang Guangxing's silhouette could no longer be seen. Only a beautiful constellation diagram could be seen. Let's enter as well. Qin Wentian spoke to Mo Qingqing as the two of them entered their respective celestial lakes. The two from the Mystic Moon Hall also entered their respective celestial lakes, leaving only the veiled young lady standing there. Staring at the celestial lake where Qin Wentian had entered, a teardrop fell from her beautiful eyes. However, it was a teardrop of happiness. Wentian Gij. A clear and melodious voice rang out. This was the voice of a young lady. The veiled young lady lifted her dainty hands to wipe away the tears at the corners of her eyes. She was truly happy. She had actually managed to help her Wentian Gij. Over the past year, she had really suffered a lot. She had left her hometown and been taken to the Dark Moon Palace in Yuzhou City by her master, who had very strict requirements on her. Although she knew that her master was doing it for her own good, she didn't have any relatives on her side. Suddenly entering such a life made her very tired. The feeling of being able to see her Wentian Gij again was extremely good. Wentian Gij, although I really want to chat with you, master is too strict with me. She would definitely investigate. I could only secretly send Guxing to Chu to see you. Knowing that you are doing well and even obtain the title of champion, I was already extremely happy. You are indeed as I had imagined. You are starting to shine with your brilliance. The young lady seemed to be mumbling to herself. She wanted to chat with Qin Wentian, so this was the only way. That's right. In the future, you will be even more outstanding. Not only in Chu, but also in the 9 continents and the Grand Xia Empire. The young lady happily murmured. Finally, she stepped into the celestial pool, and very quickly, she was enveloped by the astral light within the celestial pool. Qin Wentian naturally didn't know that there was a young lady mumbling to herself outside. After he stepped into the celestial pool, he could deeply sense how abundant the astral energy here was. Inclining his head and staring at the skies, the astral light was akin to a waterfall cascading down the astral stone pillars. This feeling was simply too wondrous, especially when compared to the feeling he had when he was in the Tempest earlier. Qin Wentian sat cross-legged as he gradually entered a state of dreamland. He had cultivated the dreamcast art, and the speed of his cultivation in his dreams was even faster. Abruptly, he released his astral souls, as strands of astral light landed on them. After being tempered and filtered by the astral soul, they transformed into astral energy that was compatible with him, and entered his body. Gradually, the astral energy in his body became even more abundant, as it slowly gushed into his arterial pathways and acupoints. Crashing sounds rang out as his 9 arterial pathways roared unceasingly. In here, the astral energy seemed to be inexhaustible. If he didn't crazily absorb it, how could he face himself? Qin Wentian was very clear that for stellar martial cultivators, breaking through to the arterial circulation realm and the body refinement realm, the reliance on astral energy was the greatest. Although it wasn't completely dependent on astral energy, as long as there was sufficient astral energy, it would be very easy for one to break through to the next level. And once one stepped into Yuanfu, the reliance on astral energy would no longer be as strong as now. After all, after a stellar martial cultivator formed their Yuanfu, the capacity of their Yuanfu would be limited. No matter how much astral energy they absorbed, their Yuanfu would only be filled to the brim. If they wanted to break through to the next level, they would still need to increase the capacity of their Yuanfu. This wasn't something that could be achieved simply by absorbing astral energy. This was also the reason why the celestial lake wasn't that attractive to Yuanfu cultivators. Qin Wentian cultivated for 3 days straight. He could feel that his 9 arterial pathways and acupoints had all been open to the extreme, and his Yuanfu was only a step away from breaking through to the Yuanfu. At this moment he opened his eyes, as astral energy flickered within them. I've already passed the celestial lake refinement grounds, but where is the secret of the Azure Emperor? Could it be that I really have to look for Fairy Qingmei? Qin Wentian bitterly smiled. But how could Fairy Qingmei possibly agree to meet him? Touching his interspatial ring, Qin Wentian retrieved the map. Looking at the location marked on the map, it should indeed be the Celestial Lake Palace. However, was this map merely to guide him to the Celestial Lake Palace? At this moment, Qin Wentian's heart pounded violently as he saw the ancient characters inscribed on the map. He flipped the map over, as streams of astral light cascaded downwards, illuminating the surface of the map. The astral stone pillars were also illuminated by the astral light, and in an instant, numerous ancient characters floated out from the map, hovering in the air. These were the ancient characters of astral light. Qin Wentian's heart pounded violently. This was the true map. The map was inscribed by the Azure Emperor later on. The map was on the reverse side, and the side without the characters was the front side. Only when bathed in the intense astral light of the celestial lake would the ancient characters appear. How could Qin Wentian not be shocked by such a discovery? The secret of the Azure Emperor had finally been revealed. Art of the 9 Astral Palaces. Qin Wentian gazed at the floating map, as rows and rows of ancient characters floated above it. This was indeed a cultivation art, a demon-level cultivation art that allowed one to cultivate 9 Yuanfus. The secret of the Azure Emperor was real. Seriously reading through the ancient characters, imprinting them into his mind, Qin Wentian's heart was filled with great waves. Others could only cultivate a single Yuanfu, but this art of the 9 astral mansions required one to cultivate 9 Yuanfus. Not only that, one could only cultivate it when they were at the arterial circulation realm. According to the records of the art of the 9 astral mansions, one had to first cultivate a single Yuanfu, and then break open the Yuanfu. 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3. The number of Yuanfus corresponded to the number of astral souls one had. This meant that if one's accomplishments in life were limited, and one could only condense a 3-star astral soul, then one could at most cultivate 3 Yuanfus. Not only that, after the astral soul corresponded to the Yuanfu, that Yuanfu could only absorb the astral energy of the corresponding astral soul. For example, Qin Wentian's heavenly hammer astral soul corresponded to his first Yuanfu. As such, this Yuanfu could only absorb the astral energy from the heavenly hammer astral soul, or the astral energy that had been tempered by the heavenly hammer astral soul. After cultivating the art of the 9 astral mansions, I would immediately be able to condense 3 Yuanfus, while others only have a single Yuanfu. At that time, the amount of astral energy I would be able to condense would be at least 3 times that of others. Qin Wentian's heart was filled with excitement. This was only the most obvious benefit, and he was already impatient. After he stepped into Yuanfu, insta-killing Yuanfu cultivators at the same level as him would be a piece of cake. At that time, squashing Yi Wuke to death would be as easy as squashing an ant. Qin Wentian was filled with anticipation. As he thought of this, Qin Wentian immediately started his cultivation. He was very clear that there was no place more suitable than the Celestial Lake to cultivate the art of the 9 astral mansions. Maybe, this painting was discovered by the Azure Emperor, which was why Fairy Qingmei chose to seclude herself here, forcibly occupying the Celestial Lake. If this was the case, it seemed that Qin Wentian's conjecture was correct. The relationship between the Azure Emperor and Fairy Qingmei had never been severed. What kind of cruelty did they experience to make others believe that Fairy Qingmei hated the Azure Emperor to the core? Most probably, this story must have been extremely touching. Qin Wentian didn't know that at this moment, Fairy Qingmei was paying close attention to his every move. After waiting for thousands of years, a suitable successor had finally appeared. Chapter 192. After Qin Wentian, Ouyang Feng and the rest entered the Tempest, the rest of the cultivators from the Wang clan clashed against each other for the stellar fruits in Wang Zhao's possession. In this battle, all the members of the Wang clan who had followed Wang Xiao to the Immortal Lake had died. However, the others had also paid a heavy price. Over 20 of them had been slain. Even Yao Sheng from the Sky Demon sect and Shiki from the Beast King Hall had suffered grievous injuries. The ending of the battle could be said to be extremely tragic. Ultimately, they had failed to obstruct Wang Xiao from entering the Tempest. Looking at Wang Zhao's gaze as he turned his head to look at the rest of the cultivators, they all felt a chill run down their spines. Those who had followed Wang Xiao had all died in battle. One could only imagine Wang Zhao's rage. Currently, Wang Xiao hated them to the core and wanted to kill them as soon as possible. Wang Xiao also arrived at the Celestial Lake and stepped into the last Celestial Lake. As for the others, they were all busy searching for their way back. 7 of them had already entered the Celestial Lake, and the others had no more chances to enter. The refinement grounds of the Immortal Lake had ended. With regards to the happenings in the outside world, Qin Wentian was completely oblivious. He was completely immersed in his cultivation. On the 6th day since he entered the Celestial Lake, the 9 stellar meridians in his body had finally expanded to their limits. They began to revolve at a frenzied pace as boundless astral energy flowed into them. At the point where the 9 stellar meridians intersected, a terrifying tempest manifested, causing rumbling sounds to echo out from within his body. In the center of the tempest, a whirlpool could be seen. Finally, the astral energy in the 9 stellar meridians condensed into liquid droplets that flowed into the whirlpool. The whirlpool transformed into a container, and the liquid droplets flowed into it unceasingly. Finally, the astral lake was formed. That was the birth of a Yuanfu. The Yuanfu gradually took shape, yet the tempest showed no signs of stopping. On the contrary, it grew increasingly violent. At the same time, the terrifying energy within the celestial lake frenziedly rushed towards the 3rd astral gate in Qin Wentian's Sea of Consciousness. At this moment, Qin Wentian was multitasking. Not only did he want to condense his Yuanfu, he also wanted to open his astral gate. This was because he needed to condense his 3rd astral soul. Only by condensing his 3rd astral soul at the moment of breaking through to Yuanfu would he be able to divide his Yuanfu into 3. Only then would he be able to form the perfect 3rd Yuanfu. This was an opportunity that Qin Wentian didn't want to miss out on. With such a vast amount of astral energy, it was undoubtedly the most suitable method to open the astral gate. The success rate was much higher compared to relying on Yuan meteor stones. Qin Wentian didn't take too long to open the 3rd astral gate. After which, his perception began to drift along the astral stone pillar, drifting towards the void. Because of the spirit beasts, Qin Wentian quickly sensed the existence of several constellations in the 5th heavenly layer. As for his 3rd astral soul, Qin Wentian had long since made his choice. It was the Demon Sovereign constellation ranked 1st in the Warbeast Index. For the sake of this astral soul, Qin Wentian didn't even bother to attempt to condense his astral soul from the 6th heavenly layer. The Demon Sovereign astral soul was ranked 1st in the Warbeast Index. From this, one could see how tyrannical it was. To Qin Wentian, who cultivated the Fiend transformation art, this astral soul was undoubtedly the best choice. Very quickly, Qin Wentian's perception arrived in front of the Demon Sovereign constellation. The violent astral energy within was filled with a terrifying demonic qi. The Demon Sovereign constellation was akin to an ancient astral warbeast, exuding a sense of majesty. Qin Wentian didn't hesitate, and chose to communicate with it. Astral light cascaded downwards, illuminating Qin Wentian's body. Not too long later, the 3rd astral soul above Qin Wentian's head began to glow with a golden light. After which, all 3 astral souls were released at the same time. From the 9 heavenly layers, the light from the 3 astral souls cascaded downwards, directly into the newly opened Yuanfu in Qin Wentian's body. The whirlpool of the 9 astral meridians frenziedly refined the astral energy, transforming it into liquid droplets that flowed into his Yuanfu. As the tricolored liquid entered his Yuanfu began to expand bit by bit. The tricolored liquid, 3 different types of energy, were clearly separated from each other. They were located in 3 different locations within his Yuanfu, unceasingly suppressing his Yuanfu. This transformation continued unceasingly, causing Qin Wentian to sigh in his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that he was in this celestial pool, it would have been extremely difficult for him to find such conditions to cultivate the art of the 9 astral palaces. After an unknown period of time, Qin Wentian finally opened his eyes. Although he was still in the celestial pool, the current him felt exceptionally fatigued. He had expended too much of his mental energy. Success. A radiant smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he kept the scroll. Drawing in a deep breath, he closed his eyes. Within his body, the 3 Yuanfu sat there, filled with tricolored liquid. Not only that, his Yuanfu was connected to the 9 astral meridians, causing his entire body to feel a sense of fullness. With a slight intention of his will, his body floated up into the air, and he could already soar through the air. What a marvelous feeling! A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. This trip to the Demon Mountain City could be said to be perfect. Now he needed to spend some time to familiarize himself with his new cultivation base and to consolidate his foundation. Qin Wentian wanted to continue cultivating, but at this moment, the surrounding astral light gradually dimmed as the astral energy enveloping the celestial pool dissipated. Inclining his head, Qin Wentian discovered that Ouyang Quangxing, Mo Qingqing and the rest had already exited and were currently looking in his direction. And on top of one of the astral stone pillars, an otherworldly silhouette could be seen. This silhouette was none other than the supreme beauty that stood beside the palace mistress of the celestial lake. She was as cold as ever, casually standing there, as though she was an otherworldly being. In fact, she seemed to fit in perfectly with the beautiful scenery of the celestial pool, as though she wanted to merge into it. Time's up. Her voice was cold as she lowered her head, casting a glance in the direction of Qin Wentian. Time's up. An expression of disappointment appeared on Qin Wentian's face. He felt that the amount of time he had was too short. He still wanted to consolidate his foundation, and at the same time, he hoped to borrow the power of the astral energy to pry into the memories of the tiny astral being. But what made him depressed was that the moment he finished cultivating, the time limit was already up. He really wanted to stay here and cultivate for a period of time. If that was the case, the benefits he could reap in a single day would surpass 10 days in the outside world. But looking at the cold countenance of the supreme beauty, he knew that it was impossible. After exiting the celestial pool, Qin Wentian turned to Mo Qingqing as he smiled. How is it? Did you improve? I'm at the 2nd level of Yuanfu now. Mo Qingqing smiled as she nodded her head. Haha, it seems like all of you have improved. Ouyang Quangxing laughed. He too had broken through to Yuanfu, and was extremely excited. Qin Wentian glanced at Ouyang Quangxing and the other members of the Mystic Moon Hall, as a smile appeared on his face. However, that fellow Wang Xiao has also broken through to Yuanfu. You have to be careful of him in the future. The Wang clan of the War Continent is extremely powerful, and as Wang Xiao matures he would gradually gain the right to speak in the Wang clan. Ouyang Quangxing reminded Qin Wentian. The various transcendent powers of the 9 continents, regardless of sect or clan, were all incomparably powerful. Among them, there were many outstanding juniors. However, not all of them would be noticed by the upper echelons. Only those with outstanding talent would be able to attract the attention of those in the upper echelons. If you wanted to gain the right to speak in the sect or clan, you had to continue growing, eliminating competitors of the same generation, in order to attract the attention of those in the upper echelons. If not, even if you died, only your parents and relatives would pay attention to you. As for those at the peak of the 9 continents, they would only casually pay attention to you. Survival of the fittest. The competition between the transcendent powers was far more brutal than one could imagine. And based on Wang Zhao's current display of talent, it was very likely that he would become the representative of the younger generation of the Wang clan in the future. Qin Wentian nodded his head. He would temporarily remember the name Wang Xiao in his mind. Let's go. The Ice Maiden was still as cold as ever. She was a woman of few words, and with a leap, she led the way out of the refinement grounds. The journey here was fraught with difficulties, but the journey back was smooth and unimpeded. Not long after, they arrived at the entrance of the celestial lake. Ouyang, Jiangting, and the rest were waiting for Ouyang Guangxing outside. Upon seeing him, a smile appeared on their faces. Jiangting, my fiancé. Ouyang Guangxing smiled at Qin Wentian. Jiangting, this is my friend Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian smiled and nodded to Jiangting. From Ouyang Guangxing's words, he already knew that Jiangting was from the Jiang clan of the Wind Continent. The Jiang clan was also a transcendent power, and had great influence in the Wind Continent. Jiangting contemplated Qin Wentian. She knew Ouyang Guangxing's personality very well. That fellow was extremely arrogant, and since he was friends with Qin Wentian, it was enough to prove that Qin Wentian was extraordinary. She politely smiled and nodded to Qin Wentian, exuding the demeanor of a lady from a noble family. Many thanks for the hospitality from the Celestial Lake Palace. Farewell. Ouyang Guangxing turned his head and smiled at the Ice Maiden. However, the maiden was still as cold as ever and didn't reply. Helpless, they could only leave with their demonic beasts. Outside the Celestial Lake Palace, the crowd bid their farewells. Qin Wentian stared at the departing silhouettes of Ouyang Guangxing, and the rest before nodding his head to those from the Mystic Moon Hall. The maiden from the Mystic Moon Hall stared at the departing silhouette of the White Crane, as a trace of reluctance flashed in her eyes. Let's go. The maiden spoke in a light voice, as they also mounted their demonic beasts and soared into the skies, departing from the Celestial Lake Palace. Within a certain palace, Fairy Qingmei's silhouette sat there. The palace mistress of the Celestial Lake Palace was still beside her, and the cold-looking maiden had also arrived. Do you like him? Fairy Qingmei asked in a low voice upon seeing the cold maiden. I don't know. The cold-looking maiden lightly shook her head, as though she was extremely obedient. Only in front of Fairy Qingmei would she act this way. It doesn't matter if you don't like him. Just go to his side first, and take care of his safety. Qinger, take good care of his safety. Fairy Qingmei smiled, her words causing a look of jealousy to appear on the face of the Celestial Lake Palace mistress. Only in front of her junior sister Qing. Or would her master reveal such a gentle side? She knew that Fairy Qingmei doted on her junior sister Qing, or the most. Yet today, she actually wanted junior sister Qing, or to protect that young man. From this, one could see how much importance Fairy Qingmei placed on him. Her master's feelings for the Azure Emperor were truly deep. Right. Even when facing Fairy Qingmei, Qing'er was still as cold as ever. Her words were as precious as gold. Yet Fairy Qingmei's gaze was as gentle as ever. Being very familiar with Qing'er's personality, she naturally wouldn't blame Qing'er. Remember, don't help him in everything. If he tries to deceive you with flowery words, just ignore him. Only when his life is truly in danger can you act. Fairy Qingmei smiled as she continued. Also, don't reveal your identity. Qin Wentian nodded. Qing'er knows. The transcendent maiden nodded her head, memorizing Fairy Qingmei's words. However, did all men really know how to speak flowery words? Go on. Fairy Qingmei nodded. A pair of beautiful wings unfurled behind Qing'er's back, flapping gently. Her silhouette flickered as she vanished from sight. Her speed was unimaginably terrifying. Chapter 193. The skies above the royal capital of Chu were clear and boundless, with the warm rays of the sun cascading down onto the earth. Occasionally, a few white clouds could be seen drifting by. A white crane swooped down from the skies, soaring into the skies above the Chu country. On the back of the white crane, a handsome young man and a beautiful young lady stood side by side, their robes fluttering in the wind. I'm back. Qin Wentian gazed down at the royal capital. 2 months felt like an eternity to him. This time around, he had traversed many countries, heading towards the Demon Mountain city of the Grand Xia Empire, where he had an extraordinary experience. This might have been the first time he ventured out into the world, but it was also the first step he had taken towards the Grand Xia Empire. During the refinement grounds, he understood what it meant by, "There's always a sky beyond a sky." Some of the outstanding characters in the Chu country, when placed in the outside world, were truly ordinary. Regardless of Ouyang Guangxing or Wang Xiao, any one of them would be unrivaled existences below Yuanfu, and could even fight against ordinary Yuanfu cultivators. Even the swallow swordsman, Mu Baifei, and the other two could easily deal with Xikong Mingyue and Orkan. Not only that, during this trip, Qin Wentian had discovered the secret of the Azure Emperor. This was undoubtedly his greatest harvest. In any case, the experience of the refinement grounds at the Celestial Lake would become an important part of his life. The white crane soared through the skies, circling above the Emperor Star Academy. Many in the crowd inclined their heads, and upon seeing Mo Qingqing's white crane, their eyes froze. After Qin Wentian caused such a huge wave in the royal capital of Chu, he actually disappeared for 2 months. So it turned out that he was together with Mo Qingqing. Because Mo Qingqing rarely appeared in the Emperor Star Academy, no one discovered her presence. The reason why Qin Wentian was considered missing was because he had attracted too much attention during this period of time. If it was in the past, it would have been normal for him to go out and temper himself for a few months. How did the Emperor Star Academy become like this? Qin Wentian's countenance grew incredibly unsightly as he stared at the current state of the Emperor Star Academy. He could only feel a surge of anger coursing through his entire body. The white crane landed in Qin Wentian's courtyard. An instant later, Old Gu, Mustang, Luo Huan, Fan Lu and Qin Yao all appeared in the courtyard. "You're back." When Old Gu saw Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing, a hint of a smile flickered in his eyes. The him now, compared to before Qin Wentian had left, he seemed to have aged a lot. "Grandfather." Mo Qingqing naturally discovered it as well. Her heart involuntarily trembled. "Teacher, what happened in the academy?" Qin Wentian turned his gaze onto Mustang, as bewilderment flashed in his eyes. Why did the current Emperor Star Academy look so different from before? There were so many buildings missing, as though they had been razed to the ground. This was done by Yu Hanshan and his subordinates from the Azure Emperor Palace. After Yu Qingfeng's death, Yu Hanshan couldn't find what he wanted, so he could only vent his anger on the Emperor Star Academy. Sadly, even after digging a hole in the Emperor Star Academy, he still wasn't able to find anything. He also had no way to find out who killed Yu Qingfeng, and could only dejectedly leave. Mustang replied, as a cold glint of light flickered in Qin Wentian's eyes. The Azure Emperor Palace, Yu Hanshan. He would remember this name. Yu Hanshan didn't suspect Qin Wentian, because he was already a stranger to Qin Wentian. He only saw Yu Qingfeng injuring Qin Wentian before, and subconsciously assumed that Yu Qingfeng was stronger than Qin Wentian. How could he have made such a connection? As for whether or not he suspected the Emperor Star Academy, only Yu Hanshan himself would know. He had caused the Emperor Star Academy to be in such a state, and even if he didn't suspect anything, he had still vented the anger in his heart. How's the current situation in the royal capital? Qin Wentian asked again. Before he left, the situation here was already extremely grim. Indeed, upon hearing his question, Mustang furrowed his brows as he replied in a heavy voice. Not very good. The troops led by the Qin clan are pressuring the royal clan very tightly. Hence, the royal clan hopes to eradicate the threat posed by the Emperor Star Academy as soon as possible. In addition to the interference from the 9 Mystical Palace, the Emperor Star Academy is currently in grave danger. Not only that, other than the 9 Mystical Palace, I suspect that there are other transcendent powers in the royal capital as well. It's just that they have yet to reveal themselves. Old Gu continued. Since he said this, it was evident that he had some confidence. Currently, the royal capital was filled with a sense of urgency, as though a dark cloud was pressing down on it. Qingqing, follow me back to see your family first. Old Gu spoke to Mo Qingqing. As for Wentian, you don't need to care about the matters outside. Focus on your cultivation. Right. Qin Wentian and Mo Qingqing both nodded their heads. After which, Mo Qingqing and Old Gu departed together. Mustang's eyes flickered with starlight as he stared at Qin Wentian. After which he nodded his head lightly, as though he was gratified. He didn't say anything else and merely patted Qin Wentian on his shoulders before departing. Qin Wentian turned his gaze onto Luo Huan. Luo Huan was still as sexy and beautiful as ever, but there seemed to be something missing compared to the past. It was as though she was angry. That's right, Luo Huan was no longer as passionate as before. The her in the past always had a frivolous air about her. Maybe it was because she was filled with yearning for life. However, her old friend of many years, Mountain, had died. Next, the Emperor Star Academy was facing an unprecedented crisis, and they were even being bullied by the Azure Emperor Palace. As a member of the Emperor Star Academy, she was powerless to resist. Such a feeling made Luo Huan feel extremely unbearable, but what else could she do? She could only force a smile on her face. Sister Luo Huan. Qin Wentian sighed in his heart as he sensed the depressing aura radiating from his senior sister. He still remembered the first time he met Luo Huan. On a wall in the Sky Harmony City, Luo Huan's alluring figure could be seen sprinting, causing people to feel as though they were filled with sunshine. Walking forward, Qin Wentian gave Luo Huan a hug. As she released her hug, a playful smile appeared on her beautiful face as she stared at Qin Wentian. Smelly brat. You actually dare to take advantage of your senior sister so brazenly? Who asked senior sister to be so beautiful? Qin Wentian laughed in a silly manner. You sure have a sweet mouth. Luo Huan rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian. This junior brother of hers, compared to a year ago, had truly transformed. His entire demeanor was completely different. Senior sister. Fan Le walked towards Luo Huan, opening his arms wide. His gaze was gentle and clear, wanting to give Luo Huan a hug as well. Damn fatty, you dare to come up and try? Luo Huan suddenly interjected, as she stared at Fan Le with a smile that was not a smile. Momentarily, an expression of grievance appeared on Fan Le's face as he replied, Senior sister, you can't be so biased. Who asked you to not be as handsome as junior brother Qin? Luo Huan giggled as she lifted her foot and left. As long as she could see that Qin Wentian was safe and sound, it was enough. Fan Le bitterly smiled, but when he turned to look at Qin Wentian, his eyes lit up as he asked, Boss, where did you go? Did you make any progress with the great beauty Mo? Seeing the lecherous look in Fan Le's eyes, Qin Wentian cursed in a low voice, Fatty, what's your current cultivation level? Peak of the arterial circulation realm, slower than you again. Fan Le shrugged, causing Qin Wentian to be slightly bewildered. But when he thought of Fan Le's ability, which allowed him to easily see through the cultivation bases of others, he understood. This damned fatty must have already seen through his breakthrough to Yuanfu. In that case, quickly go back and cultivate. Qin Wentian laughed. Don't worry, I fatty am a genius. Do you think I won't be able to catch up to you? Swaying his fat body, Fan Le swaggered away. Only then did Qin Wentian turn to Qin Yao as he called out in a gentle voice, Sis. As he spoke, Qin Wentian gave Qin Yao a hug. You're already so big, yet you're still so playful. Let me go get you something to eat. Qin Yao rolled her eyes at Qin Wentian. She was still as youthful and beautiful as ever. A white blur dashed over as Little Rascal dashed into Qin Wentian's embrace. Little Rascal's speed is getting faster and faster. Qin Wentian rubbed Little Rascal's little head. However, Little Rascal didn't seem to have grown in size. He didn't know if Little Rascal's size would only appear when he transformed. After returning to the Emperor Star Academy, Qin Wentian kept a low profile and quietly cultivated in his courtyard. Now that he had stepped into Yuanfu, he needed to consolidate his foundations and get used to the new Yuanfu realm. In fact, very few people in the royal capital knew that Qin Wentian had returned. Or rather, they didn't know what Qin Wentian had been doing during this period of time. This name had not been heard for a very long time, and gradually, it faded from the memories of the masses. No matter what kind of glory a person had created, time would still dilute people's memories of him. After all, everyone had their own lives, and there were too many things that they needed to pay attention to. Only when they reappeared one day would people remember that such a person once existed. In the blink of an eye, another half a month passed. Occasionally there would be bloody battles occurring in the royal capital. and the most common one would be the bloody battle between the royal clan and the Emperor Star Academy. Sake Street was a restaurant street in the imperial city. This street was tens of thousands of meters long, and it was very wide. There were all kinds of restaurants on both sides, and they were all at least 2 stories high. Many people liked to drink at the tables on the balconies of the restaurants, drinking and chatting. Watching the people below was also a kind of pleasure. Sake Street was very close to the Emperor Star Academy. Currently, this area was occupied by the students of the Royal Academy, and they even stayed here to monitor the movements of the Emperor Star Academy. At this moment, a certain inn was no longer as noisy as it was in the past. On the balcony, Yi Ran of the Yi clan and Elder Yu of the Royal Academy were currently enjoying their wine. Sitting at the same table as them were a few other young men, and one of them was clad in white. This young man was none other than Yi Wuk, exuding an extraordinary demeanor. Wuk, congratulations on stepping into the 2nd level of Yuanfu. Elder Yu bowed to Yi Wuk, silently admiring this young man in front of him. Yi Wuk was already ranked number 4 among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital, pushing Chiu Mo down. And now, his strength had improved yet again, stepping into the 2nd level of Yuanfu. It's been so long, yet I only broke through to the next level. There's nothing to congratulate me about. Sikong, on the other hand, is the one who should be congratulated instead since he has already stepped into Yuanfu. Yi Wuk smiled as he glanced at Sikong Mingyue. Sikong Mingyue, however, didn't have an expression of happiness on his face. He was extremely calm as he drank his wine together with Yi Wuk and the rest, yet his eyes were filled with sharpness. In order to help him recover from his injuries, Sikong Mingyue had paid a huge price. And after his injuries were healed, he profited from the misfortune and stepped into Yuanfu. As for his injuries, they were inflicted by Qin Wentian. How could he forget the humiliation he suffered that day? He really wanted to fight with Qin Wentian again, now that he had condensed an extremely powerful 3rd astral soul. Even if Qin Wentian had also stepped into Yuanfu, he still had the confidence to fight against him. How hateful! Qin Wentian had actually vanished without a trace. Not long ago, there were rumors that he had returned, but Sikong Mingyue didn't know if it was true or false. Chapter 194. During these days, Qin Wentian quietly cultivated, keeping a low profile. After the previous experience of being assassinated, he knew that even if there were people who wanted him dead in the dark, the Emperor Star Academy wouldn't be able to find out who it was that wanted him dead. 9 Mystical Palace? Royal Clan? Yi Clan? Or O Clan? There was no way to investigate. That shadowy figure who almost killed Qin Wentian was killed on the spot, and all the clues were cut off. To Qin Wentian, the most important thing now was still to cultivate. In the courtyard, Qin Wentian opened his eyes, exuding a demonic aura. Now that he had condensed an innate link with the demon sovereign constellation, the astral energy he absorbed from the constellation contained a powerful demonic qi. This allowed him to better cultivate the fiend transformation art. Boss. Fan Le walked over. Qin Wentian stared at him as he asked, "Not going to cultivate again? Teacher Mustang wants to lead some disciples to clear a street. Do you want to go?" Fan Lo asked Qin Wentian. Clear a street? Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened. Yes, recently our Emperor Star Academy has been besieged from all sides. The influence of the royal clan has already extended to our academy. Before this, because of the Azure Emperor Palace, the academy could only endure silently. But now, teacher can no longer sit still and wants to launch a sneak attack, wiping out all the people on Sake Street. Fan Lu explained. The royal clan dares to be so audacious to act so recklessly in the vicinity of our Emperor Star Academy? Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened. That's because they have a few extremely powerful characters with them. I have no idea where they came from, but each of them is in charge of a district. Our Emperor Star Academy doesn't dare to act recklessly. Teacher said that these people might be from the 9 Mystical Palace, and they want to force our academy into a corner. Fan Lu replied. Qin Wentian stood up. I'll go with you guys. Don't worry. Teacher has tacitly agreed for me to come. He said that this operation is to teach the royal clan a lesson. Fan Le grinned, filled with anticipation. Most probably, the higher-ups of the academy would be participating in this operation. Qin Wentian and the rest quickly gathered at a certain location in the Emperor Star Academy. Mustang gazed at them as he commanded. Let's split up and meet up at Clear River Street. Wentian, you and I will be together. All right. Everyone nodded. After which, they left one after another. This way, they wouldn't attract attention in a short period of time. On Sake Street, Yi Wuck, who was drinking, glanced downwards as a look of confusion appeared on his face. The number of people coming here seems to be quite frequent. Beside him, Yi Ran and Elder Yu squinted their eyes slightly. They seemed to have sensed something unusual as well. Spread the news. Those from the Emperor Star Academy have arrived. Yi Wuke gazed at the inn as he spoke. Very quickly, the entire Qinghe Street became lively. Some of the people who were drinking quietly hid in the inn, not daring to cause any trouble. They could only watch from the sidelines. Diagonally across from Yi Wuck's inn, a group of people appeared, causing Yi Wuck and Sikong Mingyue's expressions to freeze. Mustang Qin Wentian. Indeed, Qin Wentian's injuries have long since healed. Just like what the news said, after disappearing for 2 months, he has appeared once again. A sharp light flashed in Sikong Mingyue's eyes, piercing towards Qin Wentian. However, Qin Wentian didn't even spare a glance in his direction, causing Sikong Mingyue to coldly laugh in his heart. Silhouettes unceasingly walked out from the inn, and very swiftly, on the street between the 2 rows of inns, a scene of a confrontation between 2 parties. A powerful battle intent permeated the air. Kill! A low voice abruptly rang out as both parties clashed. The weakest among them had a cultivation base at the 7th level of arterial circulation, while the stronger ones had a cultivation base at the 2nd level of Yuanfu. Without wasting any time, they directly started the battle. Upon seeing such a scene, Qin Wentian understood that the situation had already reached a point where only one side could survive. Senior sister Luo Huan has also stepped into Yuanfu. Qin Wentian stared at Luo Huan, who was like a goddess of death, mercilessly reaping the lives of her opponents. In her heart, an intense killing intent burned. Wuck. Yi Ran's gaze shifted to Yi Wuck. For this battle, it was evident that his opponents had come prepared, and held the advantage. Although more and more experts were rushing over from afar, the Emperor Star Academy was also sending in more experts to join the fray. Boom. On the rooftop of an inn, the silhouette of an expert descended as a terrifying aura permeated the air. This person was clad in black robes, and he stared downwards with an intense killing intent. However, after he appeared, another silhouette appeared at the rooftop of the inn opposite him. That silhouette calmly stood there, yet he gave off a feeling of immense power. The 2 of them didn't move, and only stared at each other. Evidently, they could feel the threat emanating from each other. Cracking sounds rang out, and the inn beneath their feet seemed to be unable to withstand that oppressive aura. Gradually, cracks appeared on the walls of the inn before it collapsed, transforming into rubble. However, they still stood there, incomparably calm. The terrifying aura gushed forth, causing a terrifying gust of cold wind to blow. Boom. That black-robed expert took a step forward, punching out with a simple punch, causing a black-colored tempest to manifest in the air. However, that old man still stood there calmly, his long white beard fluttering in the wind. At the instant the black-robed expert neared, a palm imprint blasted out. The instant this palm imprint blasted out, tens of thousands of palm imprints suppressed the heavens and earth, while the terrifying black-colored tempest also erupted forth. The terrifying destructive qi wreaked havoc in the surroundings, causing numerous inns to collapse. The entire street was on the verge of being destroyed, and many of the spectators retreated far away as they stared at the ruins, their hearts trembling with fear. An expert at the upper 3 levels of Yuanfu. This time around, both sides are really going to fight for real. The hearts of the spectators trembled. Demonic beasts danced in the air, and from afar, more and more experts rushed over. Not only from the Royal Academy, even those from the Emperor Star Academy were madly rushing over. A small-scale battle seemed to have caused a chain reaction, gradually turning this place into a battlefield. The Yi-Wuk was and didn't collapse. His gaze was sharp as he stared in the direction of Mustang. Sipping on a cup of wine, he coldly stated, "Mustang, are you trying to start a war?" Qin Wentian slowly shifted his gaze onto Yi-Wuk. He had long since heard of Yi-Wuk's name. That was more than a year ago. The reason why he broke off the engagement with Autumn Snow was because the Yi clan had used Yi-Wuk's name to propose a marriage to Autumn Snow. After that, he had met Yi-Wuk a few more times. This person was indifferent in handling matters, and from that indifferent attitude, one could see the pride in his heart. Mustang didn't bother with Yi-Wuk. Although Yi-Wuk was powerful, according to seniority, he could still be considered a junior. Since Yi-Wuk spoke to him in such a manner, there was no need for Mustang to bother with him. "You sure know how to act." Yi Ran lightly laughed, as he stated to Yi-Wuk, "Wuk, based on your cultivation base at the second level of Yuanfu, I'm afraid that Elder from the Emperor Star Academy won't be your opponent in a short period of time." The elder he was referring to was naturally Mustang. However, upon hearing that Yi-Wuk had already stepped into the second level of Yuanfu, Qin Wentian was somewhat taken aback. "Compete with him?" Yi-Wuk laughed as he glanced at Mustang. "There's no meaning to it." "Indeed, there's no meaning to it. You are an entire generation lower than him." Yi Ran's words contained hints of flattery. After all, in the Yi clan, Yi-Wuk's status was extraordinary. As an elder from a branch family, his authority couldn't be compared to Yi-Wuk's, especially now that Yi-Wuk's cultivation base wasn't any weaker than his. Mustang casually laughed, as he stared at Qin Wentian, feeling gratified in his heart. Mustang had the Heavenly Eyes astral soul, and could naturally tell that Qin Wentian had already broken through to Yuanfu. Back then, when Qin Wentian was at the arterial circulation realm, he had always been able to fight against geniuses like Sikong Mingyue and Luo Qianxiu. Now that he had stepped into Yuanfu, even if he couldn't contend against Yi-Wuk for now, based on Qin Wentian's experience, it wouldn't be long before he could trample Yi-Wuk beneath his feet. As for Sikong Mingyue, he had already been completely ignored by Mustang. "I'm already old, and my achievements are limited. However, Wentian, you are different. Don't put these self-proclaimed geniuses of Chu in your eyes, just treat them as ordinary mortals. You have to broaden your horizons. Don't limit yourself to comparing yourself to these people." Mustang spoke to Qin Wentian, as though he was instructing Qin Wentian. However, wasn't it also a reply to Yi-Wuk? He was telling Qin Wentian not to compare himself to these people. Evidently, he was saying that Yi-Wuk and the others didn't have the qualifications to compare themselves to Qin Wentian. And indeed, upon hearing Mustang's words, Yi-Wuk's indifferent eyes narrowed, as a glint of sharpness flickered within. As for Yi Ran, he directly stared at Mustang as he coldly stated, "What a joke. Time passes so quickly. Back then when I went to the Sky Harmony City, you had just started your cultivation journey. At that time, the Yi clan went to the Bai clan to propose marriage. Actually, I had already noticed you that night when you were still at the Bai clan, and followed you to the Qin clan. Now that you've already reached such a level, it feels so surreal. The Bai clan must be regretting their decision now, right?" Mustang sighed. Hearing Mustang's tone, Qin Wentian could sense a hint of sadness. He suddenly thought that maybe Teacher Mustang wanted to seek revenge on the Yi clan. Mountain was raised by Teacher Mustang, and Mustang naturally knew about the matter of him being intercepted by Yi-Wuk when he was pursuing Qin Wentian. As he thought of this, Qin Wentian's heart trembled. Today, Teacher Mustang wanted to kill Yi-Wuk. Yes, that must be the case. Teacher Mustang must have come for Yi-Wuk. As he thought of the deaths of Mountain and Zijun, Qin Wentian's gaze gradually sharpened. The intensity of the battle grew increasingly intense, as more and more experts rushed over. The small-scale battle had already escalated into a large-scale battle. Not only that, Qin Wentian noticed that Xiao Lan and the rest had also arrived. Xiao Lu Wuchong, Wang Teng, and the rest were all here. As for the people on the streets, they all hurriedly retreated further away, in case they were caught in the crossfire, only to see Sikong Mingyue slowly standing up, as he stood in the air. This undoubtedly proved that he had already broken through to Yuanfu. A terrifying killing intent erupted forth from Sikong Mingyue as he pointed his finger at Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian, get the hell out here and fight me. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.